Chapter 46:17. You have to follow us too. In the vast expanse of stars, the head of the universe boat, Jian Wushuang, turned his head and looked at the ancestors of the Phoenix family standing beside him. That's natural. I'm gambling. Of course, I have to supervise you with the past, she said leisurely, and from time to time, sparkling flames floated from her long red hair. Jian Wushuang shook his head and stopped talking. The three groups of dragons, phoenixes, and unicorns are standing up. Each group occupies the oldest and perfect star field, and the distance is also getting more and more distant. Even at the speed of the spacecraft, it can take up to half a year to reach the Kirin family. On the way to the Kirin tribe, the extent to which the kingdoms of the various star domains fell has far exceeded the situation of the previous star domains, and almost no one exists. Traces of virtual respect began to be stationed here in large quantities. Star-shaped virtual men are countless, robbing countless magic resources. Sword Wushuang is naturally not idle. When not delaying his journey, he began mass slaughter of the vagrants occupying the various fuckingdoms. Just as the most ruthless divine punishment came, there were countless killings in the waving hand, even if it was 3 marks, for marks of virtual respect had no resistance at all. The ancestors of the Phoenix tribe, who accompanied them, all became more and more shocked. What exactly this guy is, obviously, is half-step invincible supreme, but his shot seems to exist at the top of the order. This guy, shouldn't he have been passed down by the of the universe, if the ancestors of the Feng ethnic group thought? Otherwise, how could they easily defeat themselves? After the fierce fire Nirvana, the ancestor of the Phoenix family has long been firmly at the top of the semi-ancestor class, and she is also in her own field. She is confident that she can meet 2 semi-ancestor enemies and retreat calmly. However, Jian Wushuang defeated the semi-ancestor pinnacle herself in only one form, and she began to look at Jian Wushuang with extremely skeptical and confident eyes. Thinking all the way, the ancestor of the Feng tribe finally summed up his own point of view, when and where you can't mess with the Lord of the Palace. Low to the Kirin family is one of the most vast star domains, and it is also one of the most peculiar star domains. Outside this Luodu star domain, a total of 6 smaller star domains are guarding Luodu. According to legend, under this Luodu town, a chaos spring I was sealed, and the Qilin tribe inherited the order of the sky. They have been stationed here since the beginning of chaos, and continue to this day. The star field was broken, and the corpses of countless monks were floating in the broken void, and the flowing blood filled the cracks. Ahead, shouting and killing sounded loud. The countless vagrants are like the tide near the shore, and like a locust crossing, they flock to the starfield that has not been broken for a long time. There, it is Luodu of the Kirin tribe. A 5-marked Suzun raised his hand and waved his power, crushing several of the unicorns of the Qilin tribe directly into loquat powder. Another 6-marked virtual respect, with a shocked arm, directly bombarded the huge battle in front of a gap, and dozens of 1-mark virtual respect swarmed forward, nearly tearing through. With an army formation of tens of thousands of descendants of the Kirin tribe, the majestic and magnificent, a colorful halo unique to the Kirin tribe shines on the world. But the dark imagination is like one party covering the secret net, and all the divine power is in it. The main gate of the Luodu star field. Above the city wall that is as high as the sky is an old man wearing gold armor who escapes the power of the gods and looks at the battlefield that killed Xintian. On the side of this old man, 5 young men with the same armor were standing. Such an endless war has not been known for how many years, and nearly half of the children of the Kirin tribe have died in such resistance. And those virtual vagrants are like locusts. They can't kill as much as they can, and they have exhausted the Kirin tribe. The old man with golden eyes was already dim, and the situation of isolation and helplessness made him wonder whether it was such an endless resistance or surrender. The declaration of the divine power universe fell, and the major top forces were either eagle dogs or perished. The Kirin tribe has come to an end. Kirin, the stubborn resistance. You listen as long as you return to the virtual universe in full. We can stop the attack and promise that you will still rule the original star domain, and unnecessary resistance will only accelerate your own destruction. The persuasion words wandering in the shattered sky are repeated over and over again. Somehow, today, the old man was touched outside. For a long time, the elder Jin Kai closed his eyes slowly. "My son, what do you think?" The 5 young armored men standing behind him looked at each other, then firmly said, "Fight to the last minute. But I want you to live." The old man named Jin Kai looked sad. "If you continue to resist like this, the Kirin tribe will annihilate the tribe." Several people looked at each other again. Their eyes were dim. One of the slightly immature Jinjia youths said, "Not necessarily, father. Maybe we can really persist until the day when the eldest brother goes out of customs." The old man named Jin Kai shook his head and slowly shook his head. The hope rising in the eyes was quickly suppressed. It's been so long that he almost forgot he had a son. The Qihong Tianjiao of that Kirin tribe was born by fate, but after entering the closed door when he was at the top, he never came out again. No one knows whether he is dead or alive. The old man Jinjia couldn't, and dare not pin his hope on that nothingness. Maybe it's really time to end. Just as he was about to shout the word, "Ingjiang," a clear chant suddenly broke through from the broken sky. The flames of light reflected the sky, and a phoenix covering the sky rose, and the wings spread like a cloud of heaven, and countless flames fell from her fire feathers. Like the geobath fire, even if the trace-level virtual respect touches the flame, it is instantly dead, and the intestines penetrate through the bones. As far as I can see, everything is bursting into flames. At the same time, one side of the magnificent Tianmen opened from the back of the phoenix covering the sky, and the red gold Mang, he arrived, and an unimaginable giant finger also came. The divine power reflected. The star dome was completely broken. Whether it is a star-studded prince or a trace of venerated princes, they are astonished to see that unavoidable, like a finger of divine punishment. Boom. The world is discolored. Novel. Void depression, the extremely huge army of the void universe, is directly erased in the presence of this giant finger. Like the dark clouds after the sun appeared, all scattered. The killing sound ceased, and the Susher Suzun, who survived under that finger, scared his courage and began to flee on a large scale. Cooing, all the children of the Qilin family swallowed their throats uniformly, and they were all shocked in the magnificent sky gate just now. Dispersed the divine power Huamang, a sword unparalleled in a black robe, pacing in the void. Oh! Covering the sky, Feng Feng swooped up from the swordless body, and Yinghua's phoenix eyes were full of flames. What are the little fellows of the Kirin tribe still doing? Isn't revenge the most right now? Chapter 46:18. Wake up in a word. All the descendants of the Kirin tribe on the battlefield came back from shock, looking at the virtual soldier, who was almost invincible. There are still 7,000 or 8,000 members of the Kirin tribe who instantly transformed into their destiny Kirin and faced the most fierce counterattack of the retreating army of virtual soldiers. The old man with golden armor on the wall of Luodu City, after seeing this scene, his dim eyes light up for a moment, but immediately pressed down, replaced by a complex look. "Father, it's the Foam tribe to support it." Still the young Jinjia youth, who was a bit immature before, excited, "We have been saved." "Sixth brother, don't be too happy. Their Phoenix tribe is not much better than the fragments of the Void universe. I'm afraid it's the bad ones. The most stable and strong youth rode. No, the guy in the black robe is definitely not from the Fong tribe. What? Not Fong people. Just now I saw him and killed half of the Sushur army. When did our divine universe exist so horrible? Enough, Majestic's voice sounded from the old man's mouth, and then his gaze looked at the sword Wushuang, who came out of the air. Follow me to meet the enemy. Boom. The huge exercise, composed of a few dark and ineffective forces, directly killed the nearly 50 unicorns of the supreme divine realm. At the end of this retreating army of virtual soldiers, there were two figures hidden in wide black robes. They were extremely horrible, and almost every shot was able to instantly kill dozens of supreme gods. It is just these two people that stiffly prevented nearly tens of thousands of descendants of the Kirin tribe from taking revenge. With a clear whistle, the ancestor of the Phoenix tribe opened his mouth and spit out a fiery flame toward the two bodies. The power that is enough to destroy the sky and the earth is that even sword unmatched has a slight glance. But the scene that happened the next moment surprised him all. The fiery flames tore the sky and instantly struck the two bodies. However, the two of them held their hands together, and the void twisted suddenly, and the fiery flames poured into the void enchantment. Jian Wushuang instantaneously affirmed that these two men must be a semi-ancestor level horror, and immediately pulled out the Tai Luo Excalibur, struggling to split a celestial sword. But the result was as before. The sword instinct that was originally invincible enough to be equal to the semi-ancestor's full-strength blow, but strangely disappeared when beheaded at the two. What's going on? Jian Wushuang frowned. In the direction of Luodu in the distance, a monolithic Qilin Baoxiang stood up, and the colorful Huameng looked like a big day in the world. The two figures hidden under the black robes saw that the remnants of the army had already withdrawn from the battlefield, and even urged the figures to fly away in the distance. "Wanna go?" Jian Wushuang directly displayed the Tai Luo sword style, and the winter and winter fields were instantly overwhelming. However, it was useless. It just stopped the two for a moment, and then disappeared completely. When disappearing, one of the black robes looked back at Jian Wushuang before finally leaving. The arrival of the huge unicorn treasure phase dissipated the darkness of the entire battlefield. Huameng was shining on the body like gentle sunshine with an indescribable warmth. The giant unicorn treasure retreated, and an old man dressed in gold armor condensed. And behind him 5 tall and tall figures looked like copper walls and iron walls. Meet my ancestors. Nearly 10,000 children of the Qilin tribe kneel on one knee, and their voices are loud and clear. The old man named Jin Kai nodded. His voice sounded loudly, each of his duties. Noah, the 8,000 sons and grandchildren didn't stay for a moment, and in the blink of an eye on this broken battlefield, there were only a few swordless men. Thank you very much for the old man and the entire Kirin family just now. The old man named Jin Kai arched his hand. His voice was not humble, nor was he grateful. Jian Wushuang didn't care. Helping the Kirin retreat was also their responsibility. When they were about to turn around and retire, the ancestor of the Fong tribe beside him sighed coldly. I said the old thing, let's help you retreat from the enemy. Is it just a thank you? Presumptuous. How dare you talk to my father like this? The big young man behind the elder Jin Kai opened his eyes, and Qilin Baoxiang already called out. The ancestors of the Phoenix clan, who had only complained, completely ignited, and drew a palm in the face of the strong young man, directly in the face of the old man with gold armor. Crisp slaps sounded. The strong young man was directly pumped away from the distance, and the remaining 4 instantly released their destiny, and they rushed to the ancestors of the Fong tribe. Enough! A loud scream rang out, and the old man Jin shook his arm and knocked back several people. "Shut up for me," Feng ancestor said coldly. "Don't say I dare to talk to your father like this. Even if your grandfather is here, I will call him an old man." "Feng Qi, you also shut up. Today you came to reinforce my Kirin tribe. Thank you, but I have suffered so many traumas, and I am afraid I can't receive several people." The ancestor of the Feng family, named Feng Qi again, said, "I do and care about those with you. Now that the divine power universe has fallen, I hope that you, the Kirin people, will go to the extraterritorial battlefield with the Shrine of Life and defend the enemy together. It's not a moment of peace. Oh, don't you remember that the Feng tribe returned early? Why are you defending your enemies again now?" The old man Jin looked calm, but his words were full of irony. Feng Qi was immediately ashamed. "Kishan Lauer, you dare to insult me. My plan is to save the strength of the Phoenix clan." The old man named Jin Kai, who was called as Qishan, stopped talking and put on a guest-off appearance. Feng Qi gritted his teeth and was helpless. The sword warriors on the side groaned for a moment and said, "Seniors, juniors are the main sword warriors of the Palace of Life. If the situation outside the time domain is tight, I hope the Kirin tribe can strengthen one or two." Looking at this action, the low-key, not-so-speaking youth, although Qishan does not have much favor, is also very comfortable. After weighing one or two, he arched, "If the battlefield outside the territory is tense, the Kirin tribe will be reinforced." After speaking, Qishan waved his hand, and a palm-sized communication order was handed to Jian Wushuang. At that time, "The master of Wushuang Palace can use this to contact my clan. Thank you very much." Jian Wushuang solemnly arched his hands, then turned around and left with Lao Zun without dragging his feet. Feng Qi gave Qishan a fierce glance and quickly followed Jian Wushuang. "Father, why didn't you let us fight the demon girl just now?" The strong young man covered his red and swollen left face and hated. Qishan looked at the back that had disappeared at the end of the star field and said quietly, "When you have that strength, I will not stop you. Even if you are tied together today, you are not enough for others." Chapter 46:19. The strong young man heard the words and reiterated, "Sooner or later, one day, I will make the entire Feng tribe pay a price." "Stupid." Qishan glanced at him obliquely. "As long as the Dragon Clan isn't annihilated, we can't tear our face with the Feng clan for a day. When the elder brother comes out, everything will be liquidated," one of the young gold armors proudly said. "At that time, how can the little dragon family put their eyes on it? The entire divine universe will be ours." Qishan doesn't have much expression on his face. He seems to be thinking about something. He said for a long time, "Do you think the strength of the sword master, who claims to be the master of Shijingu Palace?" A few Jinjia youths looked at each other and looked a little unnatural. The style cast by Jian Wushuang was so shocking that it almost wiped out more than half of the army of Su Shi. Of the virtual men dispatched by the virtual universe this time, most of the mark-level virtual princes occupy the majority, but in the style of Jian Wushuang, they are easily erased without any difference. Even the ancestors of the Feng tribe, who have entered the semi-ancestor class, are far inferior. The sturdy young man said in a timely manner, "Father, I don't believe in the magical power just now. It was that guy who showed it. It must be the mark left to him by the ancestors of the Palace of Life. You must know that he is invincible." Situation. Qishan did not answer, but he already had the answer. He could let the ancestors of the Phoenix tribe accompany him to go forward, and he was willing to lead the Phoenix tribe to cooperate with the Shrine of Life to jointly defend the enemy. Strength. The horrible sight of Feng Qi, Qishan is even clearer. If it was not for Feng Qi's unintentional help at the beginning, the Qilin's splendid fortunes would also likely pass. After weighing one or two, Qishan said, "Qi, listen, Qi." You two set off immediately, followed Jian Wushuang, and went to the extraterritorial battlefield. The big young man named Qi Ting stunned, and then hurriedly said, "Father, there is a crisis in the extraterritorial battlefield, and the virtual universe is invading. I'm afraid." "Father, if the second brother is afraid, Qi Hong is willing to go on behalf of the second brother." A thin man took a step forward, looking proud, who said that I was scared. "What did you do when I talked to my father?" Qi Ting was angry, and then arched, "Father, Qi Ting is willing to join the 6 brothers to go to the extraterritorial battlefield." Qishan nodded, his eyes flickered. "Go, let's go to the Kirin family, and have a look. The broken galaxy is surging, and countless star domains have become dead domains under the invasion of the virtual universe. I do not know whether it is the turbulence of the 2 universes or other factors. The starry sky in the divine universe is no longer magnificent and is replaced by endless chaotic darkness." The spacecraft shuttled between them, making Jian Wushuang feel chills. "I'm so annoyed. I knew that this seat should be watching aside how they surrendered, and then kneeled down and begged us." In the spacecraft, Feng Qi, who was hot-tempered, was furious and greeted the entire Kirin tribe one by one in a trick. When she was tired of cursing, Jian Wushuang said, "Leisurely, successful retreat from the enemy is time to fulfill your promise." Feng Qi half angrily and half complained glanced at Jian Wushuang. His hot temper could not be vented. Immediately, Feng Qi stretched out her hands and made a long hair from behind her ears. A fire plume with red flames appeared in her hands. "This is the real order of the Feng nationality. You only need to hold it. As if I were in person, all the people of the Feng nationality would listen to your call." Jian Wushuang didn't reach out to pick it up. After looking at her, she said, "You can keep it for yourself, then you can take the Phoenix Supreme to the extraterritorial battlefield, and I don't need to intervene in the command." Feng Qi's eyes flowed, and she looked at Jian Wushuang again and again. "You're not afraid that I won't count if I speak, and then I won't close the door?" "Afraid," Jian Wushuang said, simple and clear, and then there was no more. Feng Qi froze, and then stomped heavily, gritted her teeth, and cut her teeth. "Well, you have a sword unparalleled. Wait for my mother." Afterwards, Feng Qi turned into a phoenix and fled towards the Qishao star field. Jian Wushuang looked at the cosmic boat deck. The big pit kicked by Feng Qi shook his head helplessly. Leaving from Luodu star field under the jurisdiction of the Kirin family, Jian Wushuang was truly relieved. As the most ancient and ancient forces of the divine force universe, returning together with the Temple of Life and some surviving denominations, are enough to barely be able to compete against the virtual universe. Coupled with the constant addition of some monks, it seems that it is a matter of time to completely expel the virtual universe. In the next journey, the second son of the Kirin tribe, Qi Ting, and the 6 sons of Qi Qin followed up to show their intentions, and then went to the extraterritorial battlefield with Jian Wushuang. Returning to the extraterrestrial battlefield, watching the familiar environment and the disciples of Life Shrine patrolling outside the base camp, Jian Wushuang's hung heart really fell into his stomach. Ha! The blood of the Temple of Life. See the master of the Wushuang Palace. The first to feel the blood wave of Jian Wushuang's breath, the Supreme laughed and hurriedly came from the temple. Jian Wushuang rushed to hold the blood wave supremely. It doesn't take much courtesy to have a long blood wavelength. Blood wave, Supreme nodded and promised the feelings between them were beyond the understanding of others. Qi Ting, who was behind Jian Shuang, was shocked. His eyes were shocking. The vastness of Bloodwave Supreme's undisguised expanse was the breathless semi-ancestor's breath. It seems that this shrine of life really has some details. I have a semi-ancestor, and I have to explain it to my father as soon as possible, Qi secretly thought. Subsequently, the Great Axe Supreme Tianmao Supreme and Lon Lon the Nine Calamities and others brought hundreds of Supreme to greet him. Looking at the eyes of the Supremes who appeared like dumplings, Qi listened and swallowed his throat involuntarily. Although these supreme backgrounds are nothing in the ancient top tribe of the Kirin tribe, but they are only a semi-ancestor, and they have simply elevated the Palace of Life to another level. In Qi Ting's heart, the Life Shrine has been divided into the same superpower as the Feng and Dragon. Looking at these familiar old folks in front of him, Jian Wushuang played with ease and joy in his heart. Is there anything in the extraterritorial battlefield during this time? The Bloodwave Supreme responded. The big invasion has not reappeared, and some trace-level virtual lords have begun to return to the virtual universe one after another. Jiujia and I, the Axe of the Axe, are standing in the past. Killing the virtual respect is no less than 100. One more thing. That is more than a month before you return, an army of nearly 50,000 soldiers fleeing from the divine universe. I wanted to intercept a wave, but I found that the realm of the leading two was improbable. Test, let them go to the crack. Chapter 46:20. After listening to the description of the Supreme Master of Blood, Jian Wushuang nodded his head. And the army of the vanguards who had fled rashly should be the army under the Luodu starfield of the Kirin tribe, who had been destroyed by themselves. After a second embarrassment outside the base camp, the Talents entered the base camp. The previous monstrous power is no longer, and it is replaced by a quiet and cowardly divine power. Outside the gate of the long-desolated giant hall, all kinds of ancient grass flowers were planted by the beauty-loving female disciples in the Palace of Life. Being supreme by others such as Bloodwave Supreme, Jian Wushuang was not good enough to shirk away and had to take the seat. At this point, nearly 100 people in the temple have been talking for nearly 10 days. Qi Ting and Qi Gong also gradually integrated into this atmosphere. They share a common goal and work hard for it, which makes Qi Ting's inner prejudice start to be a bit vague. This group of guys seems to really die for the divine universe. Really a bunch of stupid guys, shaking their heads. Kirin sighed. Such discussions continued for nearly 15 days, ending with the deployment of Jian Wushuang. He waved his hand to retract the scroll of divine power, and as the crowds began to walk to their respective palaces, the hall was empty. Jian Wushuang rubbed his eyes tiredly, and one day the Temple of Life began to counterattack and clear away the remaining vagrants in the magical universe. It has been tens of thousands of years since the divine universe declared the fall, and more than half of the celestial kingdoms have been infiltrated by the Sushur. It is also a short period of time to clear up. Fortunately, the virtual force required by the Sushur cannot be obtained in the divine universe, and the strength is more or less affected. The reason why Jian Wushuang cleared up first was to beware of the virtual gods who have not yet returned. He must regulate the magical universe as soon as possible before the virtual gods break through the seal. Fujun, let's get tired, rest for a while. A man in white clothing winds the snow as cold as a frost, walking slowly from the palace with a bowl of medicine tonic. Jian Wushuang quickly got up to receive the medicine. Mrs. Lucky, cold as frost, gently shook his head and smiled. As long as it is for my husband, I am unfortunate, so let's drink it while it is hot. Looking at the medicinal tonic in his hands, Jian Wushuang was slightly dizzy. What's wrong, husband? Is there any discomfort? Quickly drink some medicine soup to make up for it. Lung Rushuang said in a hurry. Jian Wushuang didn't say much, sat down with the medicine supplement in his hand, and didn't rush to drink the medicine. Husband, you are too anxious. Jian Wushuang said suddenly, frosty as frosty. He still laughed. "What's wrong with your husband?" Jian Wushuang slowly raised his head and looked coldly. "Who the are you dare to impersonate my wife?" The face turned cold like frost, but immediately smiled strangely, and his body fled suddenly. The vast divine power surged up like a giant wave directly enveloping that frosty figure. Jian Wushuang thought about it and captured it directly from the air. The caught cold frost smiled strangely, and a hoarse voice rang out of his mouth. "We've met again." Just as the snow melted, only himself was left in the empty giant hall, as if everything just was his illusion. An enemy attack. The terrible voice resounded from outside the battlefield, and then came to an abrupt end. Sword unparalleled in anger, the body flew out of the giant hall instantly. I saw that in the dark, chaotic, and disorderly extraterrestrial battlefield, I do know when it was completely occupied by the army of virtual soldiers. Like the huge waves rising from the sky, the mighty, just at a glance, Jian Wushuang knew that this time the army of siege soldiers besieged the base was several times more than Luodu, who besieged the Kirin. The monstrous imagination suppressed all the rules of divine power, countless imaginary eyes were red, and only a single order would tear the base camp standing in the extraterritorial battlefield. A number of divine power, Hua Meng came to the side of Jian Wu's body, all looking dignified. "Damn, when did these miscellaneous come here? Where are the disciples?" Xie Wushuang, anger drank. Jian Wushuang slowly shook his head. The disciples of life in the palace, who were responsible for patrolling the periphery, were at the highest level of supremacy. In this pre-conspired battle, even the 6 marked virtual honor were not in the minority. How could it be prevented? In the forefront of the army that was facing the sky, 2 bodies completely hidden under the black robe appeared in Jian Wushuang's eyes. With his intuition, Jian Wushuang felt that the figure in the temple just posing as cold as frost was just one of those 2 secret figures. All disciples of the Shrine of Life listened to orders. Jian Wushuang's thick voice sounded throughout the base camp. "All the Supreme Divine Realm came forward with me to meet the enemy. The disciples in the Supreme Divine Realm retreated to the giant hall and died to the last moment. Swordsman is already dead. All disciples of the Life Shrine promised in unison, retreating to the giant hall under the Supreme Realm. And together with the sword unparalleled above the Supreme Realm, they met the extraterrestrial battlefield together." Qi Ting felt that she was unlucky, and a resolute face was full of iron blue. Only when he came to this extraterrestrial battlefield, did not even have time to drink hot tea, he encountered the invasion of the virtual universe, and he was anxious to scold his mother. As the second prince of the Unicorn Kirin, he died on his own battlefield instead of fighting in this desolate battlefield. He was uncomfortable, but his 6 brothers were eager to look, making him even more depressed. What to do or run now? Qi Ting was thinking about it, and was quickly rejected by himself. "I fled before the battle. I am afraid that I didn't even step out, and I was given a kill by the poor-looking half-ancestor of his camp. There was no way out from the left and right." Qi heard a gritted tooth, and let go of his life, and swept his body to follow Jian Wushuang. In total, nearly 500 supreme people hovered in the air, facing a nearly 200,000 army of virtual soldiers facing the sky, adding a bit of sadness. The violent, raging wind raged, blowing sword Wushuang's hair flying. The old statue, wearing a black water robe, is like a sculpture standing quietly behind Jian Wushuang. The king of 9 robbers, as before, did not have a half-pointed expression, but the breath of divine power belonging to the half-step invincible supremacy has spurred the peak. The giant axe is so cold, and Lon Lon is as cold as frost, each pushing his own divine power to the extreme, ready to fight against the water. The breath belonging to the semi-ancestor class is surging from the blood wave supreme. This genuine breath makes Qi listen a little reassured. After all, the semi-ancestor class is beyond the presence of the cricket, and you can suppress the invincible supreme by waving your hand. Qi Ting had already made up his mind, and once the war started, he would pull Qi Gong to follow behind Bloodwave Supreme. Just as Qi listened and made up his mind, the army of virtual soldiers suddenly blasted out in front of two vast forces, making his entire face green. That's the breath belonging to two half-ancestors. When did even the semi-ancestors appear so easily? Chapter 46, 21. Kiran is a little speechless. Her proud and invincible supreme realm can play a very small role at present. At the forefront of the virtual universe, the two wide black robes slowly looked up, one blue and one red pair of eyes, condensed on Jian Wushuang's body. We meet again. The two black robes spoke at the same time, and the superimposed sound was shocking. Unconsciously, the ordinary supreme had already been affected a lot. The black water scepter suddenly fell, and the ripples directly dispelled the deceptive superimposed sound. The war has already begun. Boom! The vast divine power burst out suddenly, and numerous modeled Jinmang swords were all around the body, slowly condensing to express the Taoist pattern. Just like the real deities came to life, the gilt pattern was plated with a complete charm on Jian Wushuang. An invisible sword quietly condenses from his hands. The territory pointed by Jian Feng is the territory. Killing Jintian is like a huge sea of darkness splashing into the sky. The first 6 marks of Xuanxuan are about 50. Their potential is even more fierce than that of Shushan. It was just a face-to-face. Nearly 30 ordinary and medium supreme deities of the Palace of Life could not even explode before they died tragically under the hands of Luchin Shuzhen. Such a miserable situation directly caused more than 100 middle-aged supremacy to start a self-detonation, and then ran up against it. Boom, boom. A fierce blast burst the sky, and more than 100 supreme bodies turned into blood mist, trying to block the footsteps of the Sushur army. However, these blasts only caused some minor injuries to the 6 marked virtual lords who rushed to the forefront, and there was no death at all. Akin's pupils looked at the entire battlefield, and then a sword seemed to condense all the power of the ancient stars. Wushuang Kendo, Zingeho Heijianini, first style, star. Like the most dazzling and magnificent star that was born and annihilated, Jianni broke free of the rules and suddenly came. At this moment, behind the sword Wushuang, there appeared his own celestial treasure, with long hair waving in the sky, magnificent and magnificent. The shining golden pattern soared into the sky, and the void was directly sunken. Even the 6 marks told him to return to nothingness. Countless gods and Hermann columns burst from the army of virtual soldiers. Star-shaped virtual soldiers died in a large area, and a little far away, the virtual honor reluctantly fled. Under this shocking sword, nearly 15 6-marked virtual respects didn't respond, and they even turned into fan powder without even screaming. The might of a sword, the prosperity of a sword, directly tore a hole in the army of the Sushur, who was facing the sky. Kill! The blood wave supreme who entered the half-ancestors took the lead, but just shot the 2 6-mark virtual statues and immediately disappeared. The bow of God of the Gods is full of strings, and a total of 24 sharp strength shots are shot out, instantly clearing a trace of virtual respect. The giant axe is like the ancient power in chaos, holding the axe to carry out the most straightforward opening the sky. Each swipe of the giant axe is enough to take away a few digital honors. King Jujia is still indifferent, just like the purest snowdrop above the snowy mountain. Every time he takes a shot, he will simply take away any enemy in front of him, whether it is a 5-mark virtual honor or a 6-mark virtual honor. Jian Wushuang can easily kill 6 marks in an invincible half-step. So why can't I be the king of Jiuzhai? One type retreated to the nearest 6-mark vanity, and the 9 kings of white fluttered, waving his hand to destroy the magical powers. The last moment of the 6-marked Suzun was still a flower in front of him, and the next moment his head rolled down from the neck. The 9 calamity kings who left the road in the empty space were all in one, and the 6-marked virtual respect that moved his head was crushed into powder. Lan Lan and Lung Rushuang joined hands, and reluctantly dealt with some 5-mark vanity. From time to time they killed Shan's 2nd-mark, 3-mark vanity. Maybe it was infected. Maybe it was for the sake of life. Qi Ting has already called out the Kirin treasure, which belongs to the invincible supreme peak, so that the 6-mark vanity in the same realm is afraid to look at it. In addition to being as powerful as the dragon, the Kirin tribe is their own inherent healing effect. The Qilin Baoxiang behind Qi listens to emitting colorful Huamang. Under the protection of this Huamang, the remaining medium and supreme of the Temple of Life recovers his injuries at an extremely fast speed. Carrying the power of the mountains, he directly destroyed a 5-marked virtual smashed god. The 6 youngest brothers of cheating, Qianggong, shook the sky. The depression that has been shrunk and unwelcome to the enemy in the Luodu starfield of the Kirin tribe has leaked out at this moment. Together with the invincible strength of the invincible supreme realm, Qi Gong and Qi Ting rushed to the forefront and massacred. God's blood stains the sky. The world is crying, and the star field is tearing. At this moment, whether it is the virtual universe or the divine universe, all have red eyes. Stars are not afraid of death. They are inferior, and hundreds of people hold together. And the virtual explosion caused by the joint force is enough to make the ordinary supreme body fall. The disciples of the Shrine of Life were already dead-headed and started to explode as early as the beginning of the battle. They knew that their strength could not effectively kill the higher traces of vanity, so they found the right time to rush into the group of star monks and blast them. Each self-detonation was enough to take away nearly 1,000 star-level virtual soldiers, and countless dead bones fell into the broken void. The sad song of heaven and earth. Jian Wushuang has long been integrated with the invisible sword in his hand, and each kind of vast sword can easily tear the siege of the Sushur army. Lao Zun stood behind him, shaking the black water scepter in his hand, and freezing all vanity near the sword Wushuang. When the last violent explosion burst through, nearly 500 of the Supreme Master of Life shrine died, and none survived. They eliminated their own bodies and consumed nearly 50,000 star monks in the Sushur army. The army of virtual men who had covered the sky finally broke through a huge wound that could not be made up. Another sword was cut off by the vastness of the sword, and the 2 black robes like ghosts emerged from the army, quietly suspended in front of Jian Wushuang. His eyes are light and powerful, a Khonshu. The invisible sword in Kam's hands instantly bombarded the secret of 2. The sword that easily annihilated Eater 2 disappeared strangely before the 2 figures. A crack enchantment surged between the hands of the 2. Naturally, this enchantment absorbed the sword ingenuity of the sword. Junmei is like Tianxin's cheek without any expression, and the corner of Jian Wushuang's mouth is slightly curved. Can't you eat it? I will let you eat slowly. Ancestral art. The heavenly gate is extremely rampant. The magnificent heavenly gate opened, and the giant palm of the sky that was enough to confront the true shadow of the virtual was sinking and sinking, feeling the unrivaled coercion from the broken sky. At this moment, both the virtual universe and the divine universe stopped. Everyone looked up at the coercion in the sky. Give me the punishment of God. Chapter 46:22. Many of the stubbles who have retreated from Luo are dazzled by this scene, and their bodies are shaking like sieve. They wanted to escape, but were terrified to find that everything was too late. The magnificent red gold gods shine like 100 rounds of big suns shining together, dispersing the chaos and darkness in the extraterritorial battlefield. That style, which is based on the ancestral power Heaven Gate, is independent and extremely powerful. It has absorbed the charm of nearly 10,000 sacred soldiers in the land of tragedy and incomparable power, and even destroyed the true shadow of the virtual god. The prestige of breaking through all things surpasses all the previous coercion. Nearly 1,000 handles of magical soldiers emerged from the illusion into a town to kill and seal off, and lowered endless power. All the soldiers of the Shishir army hurriedly backed off, and some of them retreated slowly and were immediately destroyed by the Wegner into powder. And the two weird black robes standing in front of the army of Sushur did not take a half step back. Watching the sinking divine might, they joined hands and a crack enchantment appeared again. This time, the Fisher enchantment is like a mouth of blood directly facing the vastness of the mighty power. Oh, the might of the soldiers enough to crush the true shadow of the virtual gods was absorbed slowly when they hit the Fisher enchantment. Everyone on the Shinli universe's face was fiercely sinking, that almost reached the top. Even the six-marked vanity and even the semi-ancestor level could be destroyed at this moment. The perimeter of the crack junction quickly bulged, absorbing all the energy little by little. The army of vagrants who had fled rashly attacked again. There are 6 marks of virtual revered arms, and a virtual explosion roars lon and cold as frost. An arm covered by gold armor blocked them in front of them, crushing the virtual explosion directly. Be careful. Chi Ting retracted her arms, looked at the two of them, and rushed to the front again. At this moment, everyone is deadheaded, and no one has escaped from the battlefield. Even Chi Ting is completely crazy. Before he dies, he will draw a few extra respects. It was like the crack enchantment of the mouth, which finally wiped out that complete Tianmen pole, which was completely swallowed up. The battlefield outside the territory darkened again. The 2 secret figures raised their heads at the same time, 2 blue and red eyes fixed on Jian Wushuang. Let's talk to ourselves. We will keep the whole body for you. The bizarre overlap sounded through the mouths of the two. Jian Wushuang's red golden eyes gradually became clear, and his lips narrowed. Really? The next moment, the crack junction closed, but it suddenly rose up. But in a short time, it became a huge pile, and there seemed to be something in it that wanted to break free of the bondage, and frantically struggled. Retreat quickly. The 2 closest secretive figures immediately urged the figures to retreat, and the army of virtual soldiers who were in a state of encirclement, somehow, when they saw the huge pile of void rising, it's too late. Thousands of trillions of red gold beams broke through the fissure bounds, according to the extraterrestrial battlefield. Infinite powers burst with a huge amount of potential energy. Nearly 100 traces of vanity in the nearest place were too late to even scream, and they were directly transpired into green smoke. With a wave of his hand, Sword Wushuang directly propelled the few people in the divine power universe, and the speed of light receded. The mighty power that burst from the void like a galaxy waterfall swept through. Even the 6-mark vanity has died out. Seeing such a miserable scene, the 2 mysterious figures that retreated quickly stopped abruptly, facing the sweeping divine power, completely releasing the breath belonging to the semi-ancestor class. The tragic situation in Luodu, the Kirin family, must not be staged again. The extraterrestrial battlefield is collapsing, and a crack that almost splits the void into 2 halves appears. The endless imagination turned into a screaming skull, protruded through the crack, and collided with the Huang divine might. The destructive detonation is that even the 6-marked virtual Zun can't bear it. The ordinary virtual Zun, who is far from the center of the detonation, opens his mouth and vomits blood, and the star monk, who is in a worse state, is shattered and stunned. The people guarded by Sword Wushou, even as strong as the blood, could not help but his heart beat faster and pale. Qi Ting only felt a sweet throat, and a ray of divine blood overflowed from the corner of his mouth. He hurriedly swallowed the divine blood that was about to flow out. At this moment, both the Shusher camp and the divine camp were affected by this devastating explosion. Jian Wu's eyes calmly looked at the center of the explosion. It seemed that what happened next, he already knew. The rays of the polar day dispersed. The sky of the extraterrestrial battlefield was completely shattered, and even the void was gone, leaving a scar that was permanently irrecoverable. The cracks dissipated, as did the glorious sky gate, and in that unrecoverable silent void, the two were almost blasted into bones and stopped in place. The flesh was torn, almost becoming the two figures of the blood skull, but his eyes were still staring at Jian Wuxuang. Even more strange things happened. The two blood skeletons surrounded each other with arms, but they fused into a skeleton shape. He puts on his black robe again, as if he is the master of chaos and darkness. All the people of the virtual universe, I have saved you. It is time to repay me. The weird stack of sounds, the army of virtual soldiers who had been protected from great casualties because of asylum, showed enthusiasm in everyone's eyes. The next moment, the army of virtual soldiers was even more violent and desperately rushed to the few people in the divine universe. Among the only few remaining, only Sword Unparalleled, Lao Zun, Bloodwave, and others still have a battle. Everyone's body was stained with divine blood, adding a bit of sadness. Qi Ting slowly closed his eyes. His thick and powerful divine power had already dried up, and it was necessary to explain here. Second brother, it seems we can't go back. Qi Gong grinned, and a terrible wound in his left arm kept bleeding. Taking a deep breath, Qi Ting whispered in a secret voice, "Don't talk. It'll explode for some time for you. You try your best to leave this place." Qi Gong heard the words and was shocked in his eyes. When he was about to speak, a phoenix that cleared the darkness seemed to clear the sky from above 9 days. Zhang Yi then fell like a giant phoenix from the sky, and 9 roots wore the dazzling flame in the air with the tail feathers that destroyed the sky. Countless flames fall, and even weak forces can burn. Roar. Hong Zhong's deep scream roared and stunned eternity. Even if it didn't seem to be in shape, the repressive ancient bloodline made everyone tremble. A red dragon floating in the broken void surging in the chaotic darkness, with dense dragon patterns refracted on each side of the scales. The shape of the red gold dragon is really too big, just a dragon claw grasping it, just like a giant pillar of the sky. Chapter 46:23. Rumble. Nearly 1,000 star monks rushing forward were dodged, and were instantly crushed into blood mist by the giant claws thrown from the broken void. The fire came, and the phoenix fire, like the sacrifice of the cheekbones, just burned along with the imaginary force emitted by each Shusher. For a time, the extraterritorial battlefield turned into a fire domain. Behind that giant phoenix covering the sky, tens of thousands of phoenix descendants rushed to the battlefield. Each handsome young man was naked, vibrating the fire wings behind him, and rushed to the virtual camp. With the appearance of the dragon that seemed to be born with heaven, tens of thousands of dragon descendants rushed to the battlefield. The proud Shenghua of the dragons spreads the shattered sky, and each of the dragon's descendants is at the top of their feet, rushing into the army of Su Shi with a steady pace. A one-sided situation emerged, with nearly 20 invincible supremes entering the Dragon Clan, and more than 20 invincible extremes entering the Phoenix Clan. The power of the most ancient blood in the divine universe is unparalleled. In the same realm, there are no advantages at all in the 6 marks, and the traces seeing this scene, even the calm Jian Wuxuang, his eyes were reddish. King Jujia also moistened his eyes and laughed loudly. Bloody Supreme and Giant Axe Tianyin are all tears. Lon Lon smiled slightly, and then fainted in the cold arms. Chi Tinky, a total of 2 people, gave a strong hug. At this moment, those dragon and phoenixes who are almost vengeful don't seem to be so annoying. I Hong is everywhere, and even the 6-marked virtual lords are rapidly dying under the attack of Feng Qi, the ancestor of the Feng tribe, and Longdi Linha. The 2 fused bodies were trembling at this moment, and the fury would almost ignite him. He paid an almost unbearable price for this war: the death of nearly 1,000 traces of virtual respect, the demise of nearly 56 traces of virtual respect, and the burial of hundreds of thousands of starred virtual priests. As a great protector, he wanted to destroy Jian Wushuang and took off his head as a gift for the return of the virtual god. But everything is wrong. This outpost failed from the moment the dragon and phoenix joined. In his mind, the expressive eyes that swallowed the tissues before leaving were reappeared. He finally understood Yan's eyes, but everything was late. Bite 1, I will kill you. The irresistible, violent anger vented, and then shouted the word retreat. All the soldiers who fought hard in the fire domain eventually fled hurriedly, leaving more than 200,000 wreckages. This battle of tragedy also ended with the joining of the Dragon and Phoenix clan. Looking at the permanently irreparable broken void and the countless broken arms, everyone was silent. A tear embodying all emotions of Jian Wushuang finally fell into the dark void. Master of the Warrior's Palace, we won, we won. Bloodwave Supreme whispered softly. Jian Wushuang said nothing in silence, watching the countless corpses covered with void burst out. The Dragon Emperor Linha, who turned into a humanoid figure, carried more than 10,000 dragon descendants, and Shunbu came to the front of the sword without double sides. He stopped talking and eventually arched, Wushuangongzhu, the dragons are late. Feng Qi, the ancestor of the Feng tribe, took a stunned glance at the Emperor of the River Lin, and also brought more than 10,000 sons and daughters of the Feng tribe. After returning from the loss, Jian Wushuang slowly shook his head. No, none of you have come late. The main sword of the Palace of Life, Jing Wushuang, is here. Thank you to the 2 races, and you will be rewarded today. On the battlefield outside the territory, there are only a few people remaining in the Shrine of Life while solemnly arching their hands. Everyone is lucky. Follow me to rest in the base camp for a while. Jian Wushuang barely squeezed a smile. Linha Longdi and Feng ancestors promised. Then the Blood Pond Supreme was responsible for picking up and welcoming more than 20,000 dragons and phoenixes into the base camp. Chi Tinky, 2 brothers in total, also had complicated eyes after seeing the figure of Linha Longdi. Sure enough, as his father guessed, he did not die. Chi listened silently and returned to the base camp with his team. Life Shrine disciples in the base camp were also severely damaged. There were originally more than 9,000 Shrine disciples. At this moment, there are only less than 4,000. If it is not for the protection of the old barrier, I am afraid this during the war, all the temples of life will fall. Utilizing the power of good fortune, Jian Wushuang opened a dormitory that was large enough to accommodate tens of thousands of people behind the giant hall. In the cold and dead domain, Jian Wushuang took a black mountain and carried his body back to the extraterrestrial battlefield. He carved it out with a tailored Excalibur and eventually cut that Montenegro into a monument. It was a monument without words. There is no handwriting on the monument, and it can reflect the figure cleanly. After carving this monument without words, Jian Wushuang set it up not far from the base camp. Then, sitting cross-legged in front of the wordless monument, there is only Lao Zun behind Jian Wushuang. He did not bring anyone out. Lao Zun is like his shadow. He will never take the initiative to speak, but will stand silently behind him. For 10 days in a row, Jian Wushuang did not change any posture, and the insignificant inscriptions reflected his and Lao Zun's motionless bodies. The King of Nine Calamities, Supreme Bloodwave Supreme, Great Axe Supreme, and Heavenly Supreme Supreme came to Wuzi Steel in turn in these days and stood behind Jian Wushuang. In front of the giant palace, Linha Longdi looked at it all, and some things in his heart were firmly, unconsciously. Behind the Linha Dragon Emperor, two calm bodies stood side by side. Secret voice came into the ears of his two cages. Remember what I said. To this day, until my death, I will always make an alliance with the Temple of Life. It belongs to us, and he will never forget us. The two calm figures did not hesitate and promised. And Fengqi, the ancestor of the Feng tribe standing with the Emperor Lin Halong, has both fear and anger. Damn it, this old thing, it really isn't dead yet. The Kirin tribe is weak in the base camp, and there are only two brothers of Kirin Chi, so they can't see or bother. The two brothers can't keep their eyes closed and concentrate on healing the injury. After more than 1 month like this, Jian Wushuang, sitting in front of Wazibi, slowly opened his eyes. The meaning of the wordless tablet is known to everyone, but no one flinched. As early as the moment when he stood still in front of the wordless tablet, everyone was dead, fighting endlessly. Maybe time will go back. The universe will reincarnate, and even if everything is done, will be swallowed up by the unknown that is so long as to die, but they are not afraid. Maybe one day all of them will lie under the inscription, but they are not afraid. What they are most afraid of is that after living or dying, all the people of the divine universe will lie under this inscription. Chapter 46:24. Leaving in front of Wu Bei, all those who are closer to Jian Wushuang vaguely feel that something has changed. Maybe it was perseverance, maybe cold-blooded, maybe it was gradually losing the compassion in the heart, but no one could say accurately. Thinking again and again, Supreme Blood Wave still said, "Wushuang Zhu, you have nothing to do, please take a break." Jian Wushuang shook his head, and the tiredness deep in the pupils was covered up. Anyway, the dragons and phoenixes have been in the extraterritorial battlefield for more than a few months. I can't neglect them. After that, Jian Wushuang brought everyone back to the base camp. The Linha Dragon Emperor, who was sitting still with his eyes closed, woke up first, rose and arched. Long River has seen the master of Wushuang Palace in Linha. On the other side, Feng Qi was shocked when he heard that Linha Dragon Emperor had fallen to the face of Jian Wushuang. You must know that the pride of the dragons is famous in the entire divine power universe. Except for the gods of the universe, even the remaining semi-ancestors are probably not able to get the slightest face in the dragons. Is there any weird deal between them? Feng Qi's brows were frowned. Her mind suddenly turned down, and she didn't hesitate to take a step forward. Feng Qi has met the master of Wushuang Palace. You don't need to be polite. Jian Wushuang nodded and walked into the hall. In this World War I, the Shrine of Life fell to 60%, with only a few swords and swords left in the supreme divine realm. It is already insufficient to be stationed outside the battlefield. Jian Wushuang showed this situation to the two dragons and phoenixes, and the Emperor of Linha took the road. The Lord of Wushuang Palace need not worry. The more than 12,000 dragon disciples brought by Linha will be counted from the moment they set foot on the outer battlefield, classified as the master of the warrior's palace. After waiting for Jian Wushuang to speak, Feng Qi also said, "Wushuang Zhu, my Feng tribe also has more than 10,000 disciples at your disposal, and my Feng tribe has prepared meridians for warming meridians to quickly improve." Xiangwei's phoenix breath. Looking at the two secretly fighting against each other, Jian Wushuang felt helpless, but still arched, "Thank you, for the great ancestors of the two ethnic groups, and they helped at the most critical moment. Linha Dragon Emperor stroked a smile, and later said, Wu Shuang Palace Lord. Although the battle in the extraterrestrial battlefield has subsided, but according to the style of the virtual universe, it is likely to make a comeback in the next period of time. What is your plan? Jian Wushuang heard that and said the plan previously made again. After the words were finished, Lin Haolongdi nodded. Wushuang Gongzhu means that the alliance is now divided into two parts. One part clears the imaginary forces stationed in each star domain, and the other part is responsible for guarding the cracks. Jian Wushuang nodded his head. Not yet speaking, Feng Qi took the lead. Feng Qi is willing to bring the children of the Phoenix family with the master of Wushuang Palace, the group of miscellaneous people who flatten the empty universe. Lin, Guanglong Emperor, Yu Guang glanced at Feng Qi and arched, Everything is sent by the master of the Wushuang Palace. Jian Wushuang no longer speaks, and a large number of virtual soldiers stationed in the divine universe are like a bomb that can be detonated at any time. If they are not removed as soon as possible when the virtual breaks from the seal, the consequences will be disastrous. And he had a vague feeling. That time seemed to be getting closer. At this moment, the two brothers of the Kirin tribe, who are sitting with the dragon and phoenix, are embarrassed. They are also ancient and glorious tribe. At this moment, there is not even one thing that can hold their hands, and they are directly compared to the other two races. Second brother, otherwise let's show it. Qi Sun's secret came into Qi Ting's ears. Kirin twitched at the corner of her mouth. What do you mean before the two of us are all dressed up and down? Can we offer our clothes? Qi Gong scratched his head and was about to speak, and suddenly realized that the Chuan Sun stone in his arms began to get hot. Reaching out to take out the unique stone of the Kirin tribe, a violent divine power was stirred up from it, attracting everyone in the temple. Listen, Gonger, please call for help. The chaos spring under the Hongdu starfield is cracked. I have been to Hongdu. Starfield and the ancestors of the Qilin tribe have exchanged sword wushuang, and I heard that the slightly panicked voice was Kirin ancestor Qishan. Accompanying the sound of Kirshan's panic, there was also a weird, empty spirit like a whale sucking a tsunami, and the listener swayed. A total of two people, Qi Tinky hit a spirit at the same time and didn't speak. The messaging stone seemed to be unable to support it, and it broke apart. In the hall, only that weird, ethereal sound was unconscious. The Linha Dragon Emperor and Feng Qi frowned at the same time. Immersed in countless chaos period of the semi-ancestors, their control and perception of the breath had already reached the top. And the breath coming out of the messenger stone, they did not even notice what kind of power it was, weird and extremely powerful. The two men, Qi Tinky, couldn't sit still for a while. After Xiang Jianwushuang arched his hand, he wanted to rush out of the hall. Wait a minute, I will go with you too. Jian Wushuang called them. Kirin hesitated slightly, then nodded. And for Jian Wushuang's half-ancestor strength, it was easier to deal with the next thing. This seat also went together. Chaos Spring's eyes cracked. It is important to reseal it. Lin Haolongdi stepped forward and straightened, then stood behind Jian Wushuang. Go to this seat too, and one more person will have more strength. Feng Qi came quickly. Qi Tinky both looked at each other and did not dare to say anything, but nodded. After deploying the base camp outside the battlefield, Jian Wushuang took the lead in urging the spacecraft. In the extraterritorial battlefield, the semi-ancestor level supreme sits in the town, and the dragon and phoenixes guard it, and there are not many crises for the time being. The three giant engines with absolute semi-ancestral strength stood on the head of the universe boat, and the two of them were bitter, and it was not a blessing or a curse for them to gather together in the Kirin tribe. Howling wind hunted in my ears. Jian Wushuang squinted his eyes lightly. then turned to look at Chi and heard, the chaos spring that is sealed under Luodu is, what is it that can cause that panic? Kiran pondered for a moment, then slowly said, not many people are really clear about the chaos spring eyes. Even our Kiran tribe knows nothing about this, only knowing that it has only cracked once since the initial division of chaos. The cracking at that time directly caused my Kiran tribe to die out. Nearly 10,000 ancestors and grandchildren died, and then they were sealed again. Is there something sealed in the eyes of Chaos Spring? The sword had no dignity. Kiran shook his head and said, unclear. Until the moment of the closure, my father didn't know what it was, but later told us that Chaos Spring Eye is the weakest and only place in the entire magical universe. Pole. The weakest point, the only pole, what would it be? Jian Wushuang whispered softly, and a vague sense of bad beginning began to come to mind. Chapter 46, 25. Linha Dragon Emperor and Fengzhu Fengqi have been frowning frantically. The thing under the Luodu star field of the Qilin family is sealed with a chaotic spring eye, which is known to both the dragon and phoenix families. It is also because of knowing that we know the importance of chaos spring eye. Nearly reaching the top of the universe, they have already begun to understand the law of divine power. Naturally, they know that the universe is not a vast dome that encompasses countless astral fuckingdoms. As early as the moment the universe was formed, the ultimate condensed convenience is the pole of the entire universe, which is the weakest place. It is called the Chaos Spring Eye by the Kirin tribe. No one knows what is in the eyes of Chaos Spring. Even the Kirin clan who guards the eyes of spring has never thought about half-searching. At this time, Lin Halongdi, a pair of muddy eyes, began to clear. His gaze turned towards Qi Ting, and he finally said, dare to ask, when was the Chaos Spring Eye cracking for the first time? Qi Tingyu Guang glanced at the Emperor Linha and sneered, you had forgotten the good days you picked yourself now. Didn't you just provoke the war between the three races? As if a thunderbolt exploded in his mind, the Emperor Linha trembled slightly, holding the railing with his palm to prevent it from falling down. The Emperor Linha seems to be beginning to understand that his father, the ancestor of the Chaos era that has disappeared for a long time, should disappear into the eyes of the Chaos Spring of the Kirin tribe. Since then, there has been nothing in the spacecraft. No one speaks anymore. Everyone's face is thoughtful. With full acceleration, the spacecraft arrived in Luodu, the Kirin tribe, in just 1 month. Before approaching, Jian Wushuang felt a strange, invisible energy hovering above the sky. The divine power in the Bodis meridians began to restlessly, and Jian Wushuang felt inexplicably thirsty. Then a few people looked at each other, and each urged the divine power in the body to fly to Luodu. Only Lao Zun, who had been half-opened and half-opened, opened his eyes quietly, and his dark eyes stared into the distance. Have met the young ancestors. The general officer who guarded the city saw Qi Ting and his party and flew forward hurriedly. Quickly take me to see my ancestors. Qi heard anxiously. The general officer of the Kirin family glanced at Jian Wushuang and others, then lowered his voice, slightly panicking, young ancestor, the situation is a bit wrong, and the cracks in Kuan Yin's eyes began to grow. What else would it take? Hurry up. Qi listened anxiously, and his body immediately swept deep into the Luodu star field. Jian Wushuang glanced at the strange atmosphere on the sky, and then swept deep. Luodu star field, the extremely dark and desolate central area. At this moment, one side is almost the size of an abyss pit with stars, and is spouting strange energy out endlessly. At the same time, fine cracks radiated slowly around. Nearly 8,000 children of the Kirin tribe are surrounded around this abyss pit at this moment. The unicorns of different sizes emit colorful huamang, seemingly doing their best to seal the town. The ancestor of a Qishan with a golden armor is closest to the pit, and the giant Kylan treasure appears to growl, seemingly struggling with some kind of power. Stepping into this area, Qi heard a conscious shout in this situation. But when Qishan turned his head, subconsciously, Qilin Baoxiang was instantly dim. Boom! A huge amount of weird energy howling wind emerged from the sky under the abyss pit, directly broke through the repression, and completely converged on the sky. All the descendants of the Kirin family stepped back and suffered different internal injuries. The next moment, the abyss pit quickly collapsed, and a star-sized Sunran skull looked out from it. The extreme breath that reached the top and stirred the discoloration of the star field instantly swept the entire Luodu. Jian Wushuang's heart was terrified, and he immediately urged majestic power. Feng Qi turned directly into the heavenly giant phoenix, as if facing the enemy, looked at the head in the abyss. Only the Emperor Linha, who stepped backwards, almost fell to the ground. The Sunran skull that protruded from the abyss is a dragon head. Everyone looked pale. With that bone dragon's head breaking through the seal, the entire body of the sturdy bones tore the abyss and lay across the sky. The indescribable horror has even surpassed the pressure brought by the virtual god. That bone dragon, which is larger than the entire Luodu star field, has exceeded the rules of the divine universe and cannot exist at all. But right now, it is lingering over the entire Luodu star field, and the dark breath oozes out of each of his bones, as if only one claw can put the entire Kirin tribe into an endless place. Come on! Qishan burst into tears, and the bone dragon was extremely powerful, making him never think of resistance from the beginning. All the children of the Kirin tribe did not hesitate, and each urged divine power to flee. Feng Qi directly transformed into a humanoid shape and fell to the ground. Not running fast yet. Are you waiting to die here? Feng Qi said anxiously and stretched out his hand to hold the sword Wushuang and fled. However, Jian Wushuang reached out and held Feng Qi's hand, breaking free little by little. Are you crazy? Are you waiting to die? Now, if you don't run... Feng Qi was already anxious, and in her opinion, it was already a death-seeking behavior to shake her ancestor, not to mention that it seemed to be beyond the ancestor's existence. Jian Wushuang shook his head slowly. I'm gone, and the magical universe is over. Feng Qi could not help but exasperated. Who do you think you are, even if you can hardly shake the semi-ancestor? It is less than 1/10 of the ancestor. Not to mention this big guy. You are not saving, you are seeking death. Jian Wushuang was unmoved. Okay, you are willing to find death here. My mother is not with you. Feng Qi stomped her feet and turned into a phoenix to the distance. Taking a deep breath, Jian Wushuang looked at the old man behind him. Senior, can you help me? You kid, you really got me in trouble. Yu Sai came from Lao Zun's mouth. The hood was slowly pulled down, exposing a six-skin-like cheek. This universe is very restrained on me, but it is enough. After the words were finished, the black water ripples surged from the foot of Lao Zun. Facing the white-boned dragon that hovered above the sky, he slowly stepped into the air to meet him. Jian Wushuang also gave birth to the extreme power. The purple Sichuan word between the eyebrows has become extremely shiny. Linha Dragon Emperor looked at the dragon on the sky. While the old tiers were vertical and horizontal, the power of the semi-ancestor peak had been inspired. The black water scepter settled in the void, and the ripples like ink touched the eyes of the bone dragon directly. The next moment, the huge bone palm tore the sky, detonated with inches, squeezing towards Lao Zun. Tianmen extremely stupid. Splendid dignity and divine power spread out. Unmatched divine power suppressed at the same time. Chapter 46:26. That was enough to kill the half-ancestor class, barely, and the ancestor level to compete against the top ancestors, and hit the sensible bone dragon on the sky, without any obstacle. It is not so much that it is not blocked, but it is not avoided at all. Sunran Bone Dragon raised its head, and chaos and dark dragon breath sprang up. An appalling scene appears. The heavenly gate of that majestic style was extremely intact and fell on the head of the bone dragon intact, but it only dispelled the dark dragon breath, leaving a shallow mark on the skull. Then the two groups of stars day-like death light suddenly flashed from their eyes, directed directly at Jian Wushuang, and radiated two majestic death lights. Horrified in his heart, without waiting for the sword Wushuang to take action, the Lao soon above the sky shot to grab the dead light. The layers of black water ripples spread in the air, the sky suddenly collapsed, and a large palm condensed by black water was covered under the head of the bone dragon. Two extremely special and immense amounts of energy collided, and the instantaneous shock wave tore the sky and the earth apart. Bone Dragon's raised head seemed to have hit an open-air hammer, and then fell straight to the ground with his entire body. Jian Wu's eyes narrowed, and he hurried to leave the ground and swept to the sky. Boom! That Bone Dragon's body is too huge, almost as big as the entire Luodu star field. After landing on the ground, directly killed nearly 1,000 children of the unicorn tribe. The earth was collapsing rapidly, and the entire floor of Luodu seemed to be unable to bear it, breaking the Tao Tianyuan abyss. Taking a deep breath, Jian Wushuang looked at the Linha Dragon Emperor next to him, and when they talked among the dragons that day, they came to mind. Does this bone dragon have something to do with your dragon family? Although it is probably clear, Jian Wushuang asked for confirmation. The Emperor Linha shook his head slowly, and then bitterly said, "It is the open-source ancestor of the dragon family, and also my father who disappeared for no reason." Jian Wushuang opened his mouth, and finally said, "What secrets can the dragons have to help them through this disaster?" The Emperor Linha shook his head again, and sighed longly, "No, but the old man will try his best next time." The bone dragon that fell off the ground shook his head vigorously, and then shook the sky, and the dark dragon's breath directly wiped out Lao Zun's offensive. The black water robe hunted against the wind, and Jian Wushuang also saw Lao Zun's real shot for the first time. In the first battle against the promotion of the ancestor of the ancestral class, Lao Zun almost shot lightly, the strange sense of suppression on the top ancestor level, until now, has made Jian Wushuang memorable. At this moment, Lao Zun, like the coming of the Tianhe River, carried the endless potential of the Black Water River, and crushed the ancestor bone dragon of the earth. The bone dragon shouted in the sky, without any fear, for dragon-like bone claws supported the ground, and the dragon's head pointed at Lao Zun and exhaled a fierce dark dragon breath. OM! The two collided, and an invisible shock wave swayed in all directions. Jian Wushuang, who was closer to the battle center, felt a sweet throat, and a surge of blood came back. Jian Wushuang was completely shocked. His super-perfect creature characteristics and chaotic domineering were shocked by the outflow of blood under the aftershock. What level of collision was this battle at? The Linha Londi, who belongs to the semi-ancestor class, opened his mouth and spit out a large mouthful of blood. Under this aftershock, the dark illnesses in his body were exposed. The children of the Kirin tribe, not far away, burst into blood mist on the spot. Luodu's sky dome was torn as much as possible, and the chaos spring eye at the center was expanding continuously. Seeing that most of the descendants of his clan were dead, half of his eyes were red, and he shouted, turned into a unicorn, and rushed up. The horror breath of the semi-ancestral class is always in a strong presence, but at present, even the aftermath is probably unbearable. Jian Wushuang reached out to block, but was swept open by the mighty spirit of Qishan. The original unicorn treasure, which stood out from the sky, looked much smaller in front of the bone dragon. It seemed that he felt an uneven breath and was vomiting. The dead-like bone dragon suddenly twitched a tail, and the dragon tail with the sacral spine was directly drawn on the body of Qishan. The unicorn treasure that shrouded the colorful Huamong was directly broken, and the shape of the unicorn was like a broken kite, which fell straight to the ground. Jian Wushuang stood up to his feet and stretched out his hands to draw Kirshen's figure with divine power. A body of gold armor has been broken for more than half. Especially the chest cavity is completely sunken, and the blood of God flows along the armor to the ground. At this moment, Qishan already has more air and less air. Why are you doing this? Jian Wu's eyes darkened. He opened a mouthful of blood, and Kirin opened his eyes round. Father! Kishan's 5 sons rushed away, his eyes flushed. You must lead the Kirin tribe to live and leave Luodu. This is no longer in your control. Kirshen asked with a calm expression. The original semi-ancestor was close to the immortal body. Because of the suppression of energy begins to age. Once aging, it is a symbol of immutability. Qishan slowly stretched out a hand and held the palm of Qi Ting firmly. His eyes seemed to convey words. In the end, Qishan fell in the arms of Jian Wushuang. The 5th son knelt down and wept. Jian Wushuang slowly placed Qishan on the ground, looking at the fierce battle in the sky. The damage that belongs to this kind of battle that breaks through the rules of the universe is unimaginable. The entire Luodu, whether it is the earth or the sky, has shattered, and the impact has begun to extend to the rest of the star domain. A huge spine with dark atmosphere was lifted out by Lao Zun and then crushed into powder. The bone dragon was in pain and shouted in the sky, which was a big mouth that was enough to enclose the star domain, and the whale swallowed to Lao Zun. With both arms for a while, the black water formed a special flowing barrier in front of him, but the bone dragon slammed into it, but it stepped into the cotton. Bone dragon's head. Lao Zun's body was scattered and quietly reached the back of bone dragon. When preparing to shake his arm to remove his head, countless dark breaths escaped from the bone seams of bone dragon. Make a chain, winding to Lao Zun. Jian Wushuang's heart is not good. He immediately urged to fly to the sky. At the same time, the Taro Excalibur appeared in the hands, and the vast star bristled toward the dragon's back. Oh, the clearest meaning of the golden iron and iron strikes resounds throughout the world, and the chain that condenses from the dark atmosphere is directly torn by the sword intention of Jian Wushuang more than half. Then Lao Zun's repressed palm print followed. A clear bone fracture sounded throughout the Luodu star domain. The bone dragon wailed, and the spine behind the giant dragon's head was directly destroyed. There was no longer any support, and it fell to the ground miserably. Jian Wushuang exhaled inwardly and was preparing to stand on the ground, but was stopped by Lao Zun. Chapter 46:27. He shook his head, then his black pupil looked at the ground. The bone dragon, whose head and body were miserably separated, fell to the ground again, but at the same time, a stronger dark atmosphere swept from the eyes of Chaos Spring. The unimaginable burst of energy made Jian Wushuang's heart horrified. The blackness condensed as a substance turned into thousands of silk threads, climbing between the bone dragon's head and the broken dragon's body, turned it back together. The dark breath was so high, the bone dragon came back to life, and the broken spine was filled with that strange energy. It had 4 claws to the ground, staring at Lao Zun in the dead eyes. Bring it to the sky, and try my best to delay time. I went to close the spring eyes. After Lao Zun left this sentence, his body disappeared, leaving only the sword-shaped swordsman with a round face. Why, what? Want me to delay? Jian Wushuang only felt a big head for a while. Then the bone dragon that could burn the half-ancestor class almost with a breath of dragon's body stared at Jian Wushuang naturally after the body of the old respect disappeared. Opening his mouth was a spit of dragon breath. Jian Wushuang felt a shock in his heart and immediately urged the divine power to sweep towards the higher sky. Where the breath of the dragon passed, the air was burned, the sword unparalleled was able to avoid it, and then the heavenly gate of the ancestral power whirled, fell on the head of the bone dragon. The splendid and magnificent divine power dazzled the entire star field, and one of the giant fingers of the sky protruded from the gate of heaven, facing the bone dragon, sinking heavily. This style of ancestors that even the semi-ancestors do not dare to easily confront is almost as tickling in front of the bone dragon. The bone dragon did not evade at all, and the vast finger dissipated after leaving a shallow mark on its forehead. Shouting from the sky, the huge figure of bone dragon rose up and went straight to Jian Wushuang. When he was soaring, he glanced subconsciously, and his face was almost green. I saw bone dragon's huge, almost bloated body soaring at an inconsistent speed and gradually narrowed the distance between the two. Jian Wushuang trembled in his heart, and at the same time his life was soaring. Behind him was the roar of a giant tremor. He just felt that the air around him was like a quagmire, which instantly restricted the flying speed. Jian Wushuang's heart sank fiercely, and he turned around and looked, and a Sunsen skull, almost the same as that of Deri, was already in front of him. Just at this critical moment, Jian Wushuang only felt a gentle divine power on his waist, and then dragged him back quickly. A crisp phoenix ringed through the world. Jian Wushuang, excited. "You are here." Zhiqian Jufeng looked back at Jian Wushuang, and when he mentioned the tail feathers tied to his waist, he threw him all over his back. "If I don't come back, can you still talk to me now?" Hufeng's mouth uttered words, and a pair of fiery eyes filled with flames were full of anger. Sitting on Fengqi's vast and soft back, Jian Wushuang scratched his head, awkwardly. "Sit tight," Fengqi reminded, and the wings flicked 1,000,000 miles. The bone dragon was furious, and the huge figure twisted immediately. The reunited Lao Zun looked up at the surging sky, and then looked at the still-expanding chaos spring beneath his feet. All kinds of unknown and strange forces are swelled together, and from time to time, they are transformed into various shapes that are weird. Lao Zun slowly took out the defeated palm from his sleeve robe, and a dark power appeared like a root. Then, like swimming water gradually flowing down, it seemed to carry the power of the entire Blackwater River to growl from his palm, falling into the eyes of Chaos Springs, stirred up the dark clouds of smoke. At the same time, Chaos Spring eyes closed at a slow speed. The bone dragon, who was chasing Jian Wushuang and Fengqi madly, seemed to notice something. After turning around, he dived straight towards the Lao Zun below. Jian Wushuang saw this and hurriedly said, "Hurry up! Stop it! Don't let it go!" Fengqi's huge phoenix eyes glared angrily at Jian Wushuang, and it seemed to be out of the way, fluttering his wings, and rushed directly to the bone dragon. The phoenix breath, which can burn all things, spit on the back of the bone dragon, but instantly disappeared. Gulong turned back and shot 2 dead lights directly, approaching Fengqi. As the speed was too fast, the 2 dead lights hit Fengqi's abdomen. With a wailing sound, the giant phoenix covering the sky is like a broken kite turning into a human shape and falling straight to the ground. The sword Wushuang was shocked, and the divine power surged, reaching out to take the falling Fengqi into his arms. "How are you?" Jian Wushuang was anxious, looking at Fengqi and Huaizhong, and his chest was almost the same as that of Qishan. Coughing a spit of blood, Fengqi half opened and closed Feng's eyes. "I'm a bit sleepy. I want to sleep well." "It's cold." Jian Wushuang sighed, and at the same time luck was poured into Fenkis meridians. Don't sleep, cheer up. Think of so many descendants of your Feng tribe, and you will take them to fight alongside me. Feng Chi heard it and smiled reluctantly. Then don't leave me. Jian Wushuang did not think much, nodded directly. A ray of flames emerged from Fenkis' body, and the mysterious fiery nirvana of the Wind Clan has already opened. Gulong screamed, rushing to the Lao Zun with all his strength towards Chaoyan Spring. The Emperor Linha, who had been silent, appeared quietly and blocked Lao Zun. The cloudy eyes did not know when it was clear and full of youth. He opened his arms and exclaimed, "Father, the river is here." The sound that seems to be able to penetrate the clouds resounds throughout the Luodu star field. "Father, Linha is here." The huge bone dragon body carries endless forces, and this drop is enough to destroy any star domain. Luo will no longer exist. In the face of this terrifying forest dragon, Linha Dragon Emperor's eyes were not half afraid, and he looked calmly at everything that would happen next. The imagination's most devastating atmosphere is like the light wind and the wind converging without half escape, a huge white-boned dragon head, as if through eternity, with a doubtful gaze, stared at the thin body that dared to stand in front of himself. The breathtaking dragon's breath swept the earth, looking at the white-boned dragon, head in front of the sky. Linha Longdi slowly stretched out his palm and touched it. The next moment, the majestic dragon's breath surging from the Emperor of the River, a red-gold dragon rose to the surface, entangled in the body of the giant white-boned dragon. Bone Dragon seems to gradually recover its consciousness, and the dead light in the eye sockets no longer exists, replaced by a dim glimmer of light. My son is near the river." The old voice was clear. Linha Longdi nodded, his eyes moist. "It's me. I thought it would be harder to meet you in this life, but today I finally met you, and God treats me well." The words full of relief sounded from the mouth of Bone Dragon, with endless guilt. "The last thing I regret is that I shouldn't have searched for that arrogant realm, which has caused irreparable consequences today." Chapter 46:28. The Emperor Lin's eyes were red, and he had been in the heart for a long time, but he didn't know how to speak. "Just during the time I left, I bitter you and the whole dragon family." The bone dragon sighed, and the giant white bone dragon's head dropped slowly. The Emperor Linha shook his head. "No pain. Our dragons are still prosperous now, and they will continue to prosper in the future." "That's good. You need to take care of the dragons in Linha. I can't help you." Bone Dragon raised his head and seemed to look towards the broken sky with some nostalgia. "The consciousness of treating me once again fell into chaos." Occasion. The Emperor Linha could not speak because he could not see any biological characteristics from the bone dragon. The reason why the bone dragon can recognize him and wake up from the chaotic consciousness may be the last obsession in his heart. Now that the obsession is gone, Bone Dragon has no faith in surviving. The condensed dark air that originally gathered around the body began to disintegrate, and Senran's bones began to dismember. The light in the bone dragon's eyes finally dissipated at the time of dispersal. He finally said a word to the Emperor Linha. "Exhort the entire dragon family. Don't try to find that vain realm. I am the end." After saying this, the bone dragon dismembered, and the huge bone nirvana was scattered like dust in the broken star field. The ancestor dragon body died, and the most basic blood and vitality of the entire dragon family disappeared, was returned. I don't know how many chaos ages can't grow, so that the descendants of the dragon clan, who did not even have a half-ancestor level, are all nourished by the ancestors at this moment. In the base camp of extraterritorial battlefields, more than 10,000 descendants of the dragon clan are patrolling and garrisoning. Each descendant of the dragon tribe directly spans a complete realm entering elementary and advanced, advanced into the top, top into the half-invincible, and invincible into the peak. And Long Ling, the two Dragon Clan dragons in Long Chi, who are soaked and invincible, have touched that barrier at the moment, and hurriedly waved to create the kingdom of God. They did not dare to enter it for a moment, and seized the slightest breath. Shipped. It's been too long, long enough that they have been completely desperate. Now that this opportunity has arisen, they will never give up. On the ground of the broken Luodu starfield, Linha Dragon Emperor silently felt the return of the dragon ancestors. He is still a semi-ancestor, and even the return of his ancestors will not allow him to break through that level of concubine, because the dark disease in Linha Dragon Emperor was the cause and effect of the ancient curse set by Fengzhu and King Qilin in the War of the Three Races, and it will not decay with the passage of time. Feeling the ancient mantra of the cheekbones in the body, the Dragon Emperor Linha has long been relieved. He will guard the dragons while he is alive, and so will he after death. Looking at the 5 sons of Qilin kneeling and crying, the Emperor Linha had already started to kill. Divine power gathered in his hands, and he walked slowly step by step with semi-ancestor level strength. The highest realm is none other than the invincible Supreme Peak Kirin 5 sons, who will undoubtedly die. When the Emperor Linha shot his hand to prepare for a blow, the entire Luodu shuddered. Instantly, the broken sky suddenly collapsed, and the earth split instantly. The Eye of Chaos Spring, which was almost completely sealed by Lao Zun, was suddenly broken, and a large amount of dark and unknown breath burst out. It was so horrible that it could not add energy to penetrate the world. Even the semi-ancestors could not stand near this breath. Jian Wushuang looked at the scene where the world was changing color, and the unpleasant feeling in his heart had already happened. Will this seat take you out of here? In the fiery flames, a figure with a tall and perfect figure stepped out of the flames, and the fire lotus turned into flames bloomed in her whole body. She watched the twinkling eyes of Jian Wushuang's phoenix. Feng Qi came out of the fierce fire nirvana, and his breath reached the top, even showing signs of faint breakthrough. Jian Wushuang shook his head and said positively, "The crisis has not been resolved. I can't leave." Feng Qi shrugged dissatisfied and muttered a wooden murmur. Standing up to look at the weird darkness, Jian Wushuang faintly felt that there was something familiar. The 5 sons of Qilin have already stood up. After listening to the Emperor Linha, Qilin took a deep look, and the children of the Kirin family, who had survived, left Luodu Starfield. Jian Wushuang stood up beside Lao Zun and said softly, "Is there a situation?" Lao Zun nodded slightly. His eyes were rarely vigilant. Jian Wushuang did not dare to carelessly, and secretly mobilized the divine power to deal with everything that would happen next. The sacred place of the Qilin tribe, Luodu, was completely broken, and the mainland turned into star fragments, drifting into the depths of the universe. Only the chaos spring erupted into a great terror energy. Like a giant gate leading to an unknown realm, a phantom of the sky is slowly condensing in it. The next moment, the virtual shadow stepped out from the eyes of Chaos Spring. Jian Wushuang's pupils shrank sharply, and the phantom that seemed to step out from the ancient times was the phantom that was sealed by the gods of the body in the chaos of time and space. Nearly 20,000 years later, he finally returned from chaos. Just let Jian Wushuang never think of it. The virtual actually returned from the pole of the magical universe. This will be an unimaginable disaster for the divine universe. The lingering black mist dispersed, and Jian Wushuang saw the true appearance of the virtual for the first time. A black gold, 3-pronged imperial crown is tied in the long hair, and the angular cheeks are filled with endless evil magnificence. The suit crocheted with black gold thread is hunting without wind. There is no communication, just a glance. Su Shun is pointing away to Xiang Jian Wushuang. The horror of life and death came to mind, and that sense of powerlessness once again brought Jian Wushuang back to his first wave of suppression. As if the evil power of all ages had condensed, even the void collapsed under this finger. And Jian Wushuang also used his strongest sword intention at the first time. From the rules of the universe, the vastness of swordsmanship carries endless power and violently collides with the finger of the virtual god. The dazzling stars stiffly cut into the darkness as thick as the ink, and they hit each other. Everyone was completely shocked. www. Novel. No one can believe that Jian Wushuang dare to face the real ancestor existence in a half-step invincible state. Is he crazy? He must be crazy. Feng Qi felt a terrible shock in her heart and couldn't believe the thin body. However, that sword Wushuang's most dazzling and pure style of swordsmanship just blocked the virtual for a moment, and then fell apart. That monstrous finger that is enough to suppress eternity is finally coming. Every pore of Jian Wushuang was stained with blood, and the crimson eyes were full of madness. Regardless of all the consequences, he used the prohibition at all costs. Divine power is burning and surging, and the light is like the big sun that makes people dare not look directly at it. Jian Wushuang burned the essence of blood at the cost of life. 3 heads. Chapter 46:29. It was an irreversible, forbidden technique. At its own expense, it broke through almost 10 times its own energy. Once in use, it is an endless situation. In order to burn his own half-step invincible and supreme state, he resolutely faced the of emptiness. Like the burning sun, everything in Jian Shuang's body is flourishing. The black robe could not bear Sheng Ji's divine power, shattered on its own, and bear his chest full of godliness. Then Jian Wushuang showed the tendency to hold the sky with one hand and met the mighty finger. The originally broken star field was directly transformed into the void, and the entire Luodu star field was associated with nearly 20 satellite fields, and eventually became niobium. In this indescribable horror explosion, even the semi-ancestors cannot stand. Regardless, Feng Qi spit out a blood of God, then stunned and fell into the void. The Emperor Linhe was also overwhelmed, and he fainted after spitting out a large blood. Only 3 bodies stand in this boundless and broken void. The horrible finger of Shushan was finally taken over by the sword, unparalleled, and his dazzling pattern was dazzling to the extreme. At the same time, 360 million pores were bleeding, but they were instantly evaporated by Shengji's divine power. The fierce hatred of Jian Wushuang, who did not conceal it, burst out from the bottom of his eyes. In the face of this small, tenacious figure that can take one's finger, even the virtual can't help it. How could the original ants have grown so much? After all, you can't stay. Xian Shun gave another blow, a palm that was enough to cover the earth, and then broken down into the void. In the eyes of Jian Wu's eyes, the belligerent meaning was fierce. He was no longer passive, but merged with a style of heavenly gait and resolutely collided. He is already deadheaded, and 10% of his power is here. Huang Huang's mighty power reflects the sky like daylight. This style of sky gate is extremely sloppy, allowing Jian Wushuang to touch the mysterious edge with a half-step invincible supreme state. He seemed to have returned to the place of tragedy and felt freely in his own divine power dojo. At this moment, there was only a sigh of relief between the heavens and the earth. Oh, idiot! Lao Zun slowly opened his eyes, facing the pole that was about to bloom, and quietly disappeared. The next moment, a dark shadow appeared quietly behind Jian Wushuang. One hand was holding the flesh of his neck, and then disappeared. Boom, boom, boom. The two extreme breaths collided, and even the void was annihilated, and the indescribable detonation made it impossible to survive any soul here. The of imagination stood frowning at the sight of the talented one. It hurts. Jian Wushuang took a sigh of cold air and called with pain. Lao Zun snorted and released the palm of his neck, while at the same time he slaps a strange energy on the chest of Jian Wushuang. Strange and majestic energy enters the body. The burning essence of endless essence blood has even stopped burning. That lost blood seemed to be slowly backtracking, and Jian Wushuang was completely shocked. Before he spoke, a gentle force dragged him away. Feng Qi, who has become a giant phoenix, throws his sword wushou on his back, and a pair of phoenixes are full of anger. Do you guys really think that you can be dead as soon as you die? Act. I only say one word. If you die, I will immediately lead the Feng tribe to surrender to the virtual universe. So please do it for yourself. Jian Wushuang scratched his head. Embarrassing. The old venerable hand stood in place, looking at the false with the crown of 3 forks, showing bad face. Give you 3 breaths and roll from my eyes. Jin looked calm and looked at Lao Zun from a distance, and one side was 10 times better than the previous Tongtian palm print cover. Lao Zun sighed angrily and waved his sleeves as he stepped forward. Thousands of miles of tremor in the void. The dark thunder easily and instantly defeated the heavenly palm print. Since you don't roll away, stay. An endless sigh sounded, and on the dark and broken sky, a roaring black water river suddenly fell. As soon as Zujin's eyes were fixed, he seemed to be aware of something, and his eyes flashed with taboo. He no longer stood where he was, with his hands behind his back, and wanted to leave. However, from the dumped Heishui River, a huge arm was suddenly plunged out and slammed directly into the virtual god. With a wave of sleeves in his Chinese clothes, endless virtual forces built up layers of barriers to stand in front of him. However, that giant arm easily penetrated all the defenses and actually bombarded the virtual god. A horrific energy of horror erupted completely, and the virtual could no longer remain indifferent, blocking his arms crossed. There is no magnificent burst, and the sound is dull to the extreme. The sleeves and robes of Zishenwafu were all shattered, embarrassed, and even the trigeminal crown on the head was slightly skewed. The virtual was completely shocked, and he was able to overpower himself with one force. How could there be such a person in these 2 universes? You don't belong here. Su Shun looked at Lao Zun, word by word. So what? Lao Zun stepped forward, quietly. Taking a deep breath, Su Xing stared at him, and then fled into a cloud of black smoke. Lao Zun's eyes narrowed slightly, and he reached out to hit the final blow. Endless lightning appeared above the broken void, and together they sent a penalty. The imaginary who was leaving with a full strength snorted, and most of the black Jinhua suit on his body shattered, but instead of stopping, he left at a faster pace. At this point, the entire Luodu starfield was completely dead. Lao Zun looked at the chaotic spring, eye rising from the void and scorching and surging, and shot again to block. Cosmic boats, like dim stars, travel under a starry sky. There was silence on the deck. As a result of this incident, less than 1/10 of the descendants of the Kirin tribe, that is, a large number of middle and high supreme deaths. The remaining Kirin tribe is less than tens of thousands. All the descendants of the Kirin tribe looked at Linha Longdis eyes and couldn't wait to tear him away. If it wasn't for the dragon ancestral bone, dragon, how could his Kirin tribe suffer so much? But now their Kirin clan does not even have a half-ancestor class. What do they use to slay Linha Dragon Emperor? Only waiting for the return of the last astounding Tian Hong of the Kirin tribe, they can repay this sea. Buried under the heart of endless hatred, Qi Ting and the remaining 4 sons began to appease the remaining descendants of the tribe. Lao Zun seemed a little tired, and Jian Wushuang condensed into a chair with divine power to make Lao Zun sit down. However, the situation of the dragon and Kirin races is no longer mediation by Jian Wushuang. Xian Shun returned. Civil strife was approaching, and even he had a sense of weakness for a while. With the suspicious and overbearing character of the virtual god, a battle that really caused the divine universe to collapse may have begun. Chapter 46:30. The burned essence blood was traced back by Lao Zun by special means, but the sequelae that remained were a constant manifestation. With the disorder of the meridians, Jian Wushuang could only comb his teeth bit by bit. Perhaps after seeing his pain, Feng Qi pressed his palm directly behind his back, slowly conveying the vast and pure phoenix breath. Swordless fluttered slightly, then stiffened. "Thank you. I'm really insincere. Do you know how many times the old lady has saved you, dare to treat the life-saving benefactors like this?" Feng Qi was dissatisfied. "I really don't understand you, Guy. Even when you get excited, you even take off your clothes." Leaving from Luodu Xingyu, Jian Wushuang carried the last Kirin tribe and sailed to the base camp of the extraterritorial battlefield. With more than 1 month in full force, the spacecraft finally came to the extraterritorial battlefield. Jian Wushuang's most worried scene did not appear. The base camp outside the field was calm. The patrol teams of the Dragon and Feng were still patrolling. Blood Wave Supreme and others are already waiting outside. Jian Wushuang flew to Shin Channel, swash and break through the sealback. Blood Wave Supreme and others have changed their face when they heard the words, and then said, "It seems that those who broke through the cracks a few days ago should be virtual gods." Jian Wushuang heard the words and quickly let the Blood Wave Supreme talk. About 10 days ago, a powerful virtual force emerged from the depths of the divine universe, but did not conflict with the base camp, but went straight through the cracks. The 2 dragon and phoenixes stationed there damaged nearly 100 extreme. Jian Wushuang's brows frowned. It seemed that the virtual had returned to the virtual universe, so the time to launch the next war of catastrophe would be getting closer. Maybe 1,000 years, maybe 10,000 years. Will the false gods be afraid of the existence of divine power in the universe and dare not start the war of catastrophe or extend the time? After a little thought, Jian Wushuang rejected the first point. The divine power universe now has only one old respect, which can stand invincible, but the virtual universe is not just the virtual god. The true shadow that was swallowed out in the extreme starfish field of the virtual universe just gave Jian Wushuang great pressure at a glance. The Emperor Mystery, who was so mysterious to the extreme, was afraid that his strength would be much higher than that of the virtual god. In addition to the one who has been promoted to the ancestor level, the virtual universe light is known by Jian Wushuang, and there are 3 ancestor levels. And the divine universe, there is only one old respect. Jian Wushuang didn't dare to think about it anymore. The 3 ancestors of the virtual universe almost made Jian Wushuang feel despair. Blood Wave Supreme signaled to several people, then whispered softly, "The master of Wushuang Palace, there is also good news. 2 dragons have been promoted to the semi-ancestor level recently." "What semi-ancestor?" At this moment, both Feng Qi, and Qilin tribe Qi Ting, and others have their eyes wide open. So far, only Feng Qi is a half-ancestor of the Feng tribe, and Qishan of the Kirin tribe has died. There is no half-ancestor, and the Dragon tribe has 3 half-ancestors, 2.5 ancestors, which means that the dragons once again stepped on the soles of the Phoenix and Kirin. The Emperor Linha heard the words, and his depressed face also stretched a lot. "God bless my dragon family, bless my dragon family." There was a sadness in the eyes of Qi Ting, and his firm heart began to shake. Feng Qi frowned and wondered what she was thinking. After Jian Wushuang heard the news, his complexion also stretched a lot. The existence of semi-ancestors can also affect the battle situation, which can greatly reduce the loss of living power. Sword warriors have a premonition, the return of the virtual god. At most 1,000 years, the war of catastrophe will start again. During this time, breaking through the realm is his most urgent task at the moment. At the same time, after the last battle, most of the Shrine of Life was almost damaged, and Jian Wushuang decided to assemble and repair it within this time. The cosmic boats leave from the base camp, and the assembled orders are scattered in the divine universe like the fire of stars. He wants to tell all the Sanzhou of the divine universe, as well as the clans of stubborn resistance, to do their best to deal with the fiercest battle in the future. After commanding all of this, Jian Wushuang flew directly to the Wazibi, breaking through that level with great concentration. Long before the burning of blood and the face of the virtual god, Jian Wushuang felt the unbreakable state and began to shake a little. In any case, this time we must break through half-step invincible and enter the invincible realm. Jian Wushuang has some expectations. He can shake the semi-ancestors only in a half-step invincible state. What about the invincible state? Sitting in front of a huge monument without a word, Jian Wushuang closed his eyes and began to realize the previous breakthrough point. Dao Hua Yin emerged from his body, making a slight ripple, and Lao Zun still stood behind Jian Wu's body calmly, as if falling into a deep sleep. The years passed, and 500 years passed. During this period, the cosmic boats that left the base camp began to return and brought back with a strong strength of casual repair. They are either the clans that were destroyed or the monks who survived the last battle of the Holocaust. Everyone has great strength. It is just the first batch of returning cosmic boats that brought back nearly 50,000 monks. Ordinary Supremes have reached as much as 5,000. Not to mention that there are nearly 20 people who participated in the first Holocaust, and then the Invincible Supreme. With the appearance and joining of each monk, it means that the war of catastrophe is one more chance and more fierce at the same time. Every monk who came to the extraterrestrial battlefields already knew that this war would bet on the lives and luck of generations of the magical universe. They couldn't lose, so they got together here and made it to the battle. As the first batch of spacecraft returned, the second and third batches returned in turn. One monk went down one after another from the cosmic boat, and at the same time, there was a steady stream of monk-style meals and lodgings set foot in each star field and came step by step from each star field. Set foot in front of the base camp of the extraterritorial battlefield, everyone's face has its own expression, but the most is silence and perseverance. Every monk knows where he will be in the next battle. In the face of an enemy that is several times as powerful, they don't know if their death can be exchanged for a breath of offspring. But even so, they still came. Seeing that nearly 300,000 monks have come to this extraterrestrial battlefield, Bloodwave Supreme, and others have already burst into tears. No one knows how far the war at the expense of life and death will proceed, because most people will die peacefully or violently in the process. The huge extraterrestrial battlefield has not become lively because of a large number of monks. Here, forever belongs only to eternal death and coldness. Chapter 46:31. For 800 years, a steady stream of monks came to the extraterritorial battlefield, and the cities rose up around the base camp. The first 300,000 monks have also assembled more than 2 million. At the same time, there are many familiar forces joining, making the blood wave supreme. The Jyoti Pavilion, which had been destroyed after the last battle of the Holocaust, reappeared. Red Ear Supreme, Purple Hair Supreme joined in turn. Xingkong Jianzong, who was on the run, also rushed to the extraterritorial battlefield. Wu Jianxian, as always, just added a sense of annihilation and indifference. The ancestor by ape smelled the Order of the Life Shrine Assembly, and in the first 100 years he carried his children and grandchildren to the extraterrestrial battlefield. The most surprising thing about Bloodwave Supreme is that the Taishu Temple, which thought that it had been a virtual universe, did not surrender. The Taishu Emperor was just as evil as tens of thousands of years ago. Seeing that Bloodwave Supreme not only lost his body, but broke through the Invincible Supreme and achieved the position of half-ancestor, he also didn't say much, but just asked to see Jian Shuang's sword. Bloodwave Supreme did not refuse. After pointing the direction of the sword Wushuang with his fingers, the Emperor Taishu stepped forward. Afterwards, the drunk man Lao Chier, who was swaying in the sky, lingered around, a broken snowflake sword carrying a gourd, a tattered shirt, and 2 flushes hanging on his face. He was drunker than 20,000 years ago, but anyone who knew him knew that he would never be drunk. The Sword Alliance, created by the ancient road of the starry sky, where the sword Wushuang is located, has all arrived. The 9-star holy place, the 9-star holy sun, and the Mo Luo family have also come. At this point, for more than 800 years, nearly 3 million monks have been assembled. It is often that one star field can give birth to a supreme divine realm. At this moment, there are more than 200,000. Everything today is far beyond the scale of any catastrophe. The infinite star field of the entire divine power universe, even for distant places, has contributed its own power. The position of the Supreme Master of Life, temporarily adjusting the huge number of monks. The wordless monument near the base camp almost became a landscape, and every monk who came to the extraterritorial battlefield came here to watch. Most of them secretly wept. The Dragon and Feng tribe jointly dispatched more than 200 clan disciples to take turns guarding Jian Wushuang, and the Feng ancestor Feng Qi was waiting here. After more than 900 years of being so busy, no one feels boring. All monks are breaking through themselves as much as possible. When you say Jian Wushuang can wake up, will there be any problem? A super sophisticated overlord stood not far from the monument and looked at the sword sitting like a clay sculpture. Unparalleled, the Jiu Xing Shengzi, who is also in the Sword Alliance, hugged his arms and said quietly, "You're better to worry about him than to worry about yourself first. He is a monster of heaven and earth." The overlord pouted his lips, glanced at the Jiu Jiawang not far away, and then lowered his voice. "You said, is sword Jianshuang today more powerful than Jiu Jiawang?" Jiu Xing Shengzi glanced at the overlord, then shook his head. "I don't know, but Jian Wushuang has never let me down. Today he is already the master of the Palace of Life. Do you know what that means? And I heard that without the sword unparalleled before the retreat, it can already compete with the semi-ancestors." Waking up the dreamer in a word, the overlord suddenly realized that there is a semi-ancestor in the current life temple, but it is even more terrible than his own ancestor. And Sword Wushuang can take the position of the palace master, which means the overlord didn't dare to continue to think about it. Although Jian Wushuang was also an immortal genius in his heart, it was too scary to be able to compete with the semi-ancestors in a half-step invincible state. The wine gourd was taken from the tip of the madman Lao Kier, and the king of 9 kings paid a respectful respect to the back of Jian Wushuang, and then drank a large mouthful. "How are you? My wine is not strong." Lao Kier asked with a smile. King Jiulong grinned and said, "Lie." The old beggar was extraordinarily happy, as if he heard the best compliment, grabbing the wine gourd and filling himself with a big mouthful. After a long drink, the old beggar was drunk. "In my long life, I have only fought the Holocaust once. That is, the last battle in which the sky fell. Do you know why I didn't take part in the first Holocaust? King Jujia shook his head. The old beggar grinned. That's because I'm too selfish. Selfish? The king of Jiolong was confused. As if in remembrance, Lao Kier's eyes seemed to flourish in the past. I became famous before the first Holocaust, but I did not participate in the first Holocaust. At that time, I was in the world of all things, but advertised I am independent and everything has nothing to do with me. It wasn't until the start of the first battle of the Holocaust that I realized vaguely that everyone was not independent. At that time, the divine universe was also half occupied, and everything I loved was destroyed in silence. It was during that catastrophe that I stayed out of sight, but saw the glory of a group of people. For the first time, the empty Tao heart had pursuit. Until the last catastrophe, I finally fought side by side with them, but they all left one by one. Only I was alive. I used to think that if I grew up step by step, the ultimate purpose was just to protect. It would be too tedious. But fortunately, the long years taught me a lesson and made me realize that now I have finally come to this road completely. Lao Kier has always smiled. I was a young man, and I witnessed the era God who turned the tide with my own strength. Now my greatest hope is to witness the rise of the next Eurasian God and lead the whole divine universe lives well. Speaking of which, Lao Kier turned away and walked away. Selfish guys like me hope that the divine universe is getting less and less. Jiu Jia Wang Jingjing watched the drunk man Lao Kier, who was attacking the gangster shirt, and an inexplicable blue shirt swordsman overlapped it. Perhaps the old beggar in his youth was so wanton. Returning to the king of 9 calamities, God looked at the figure sitting in front of the monument without words. You guys, I am looking forward to witnessing your growth. The years of 1,200 years pass by, but people change between spring and autumn, and Shua Shui replaces Yangchun. But for these monks who have been on the way to the monastic road, it is just a little bit of mood. The figure sitting under the monument has finally moved in this long time. The falling dust lightly raised, and a trace of the dignified godliness surged spontaneously. Chapter 46:32. The streamlined divine pattern is like a flowing river, rising and flowing with the end of the sword. An old statue, like a clay statue, suddenly opened his eyes and looked at his back, then went silent again. Then Feng Qi, after perceiving Jian Wushuang's breath fluctuation, also awakened from deep sleep. What is this guy? Haven't even woke up yet. Feng Qi looked puzzled, far enough to watch Jian Wushuang far away before giving up. As the years went by, the sword-like long river flowing around Jian Wushuang became even more pure, like a star emitting a blue glow. His breath was even longer, and he spit out a sip slowly every 100 years. And that layer of emptiness is gradually weakening. The monks who gathered to come to the extraterritorial battlefield gradually fixed themselves at 5 million people. The base camp is not enough to allow all monks to settle down, and the Bloodwave Supreme will be able to lead the Dragon and Phoenix family to expand. Nearly 60 magnificent big cities have become the Archguard, and they have risen around the base camp. All monks are waiting. It's been more than 1,000 years, and the talent of Jian Wushuang should also wake up. The overlord thought and felt his chin. The patriarch's ancestor, White Ape, patted him angrily. You thought it was so easy to eat and drink water for the promotion of Invincible Realm. I think it took a dozen chaotic periods to promote the invincible realm of the old man. The overlord touched his head. I have a feeling that Jian Wushuang will wake up soon. The white ape didn't speak again and looked forward to Jian Wushuang's back. Little guy, don't break through that invincible state. In these 1,000 years, the battlefield outside the region is not peaceful. As a scout pioneer, The vagrants constantly broke through the cracks, trying to find out the situation. Bloodwave Supreme has long been prepared. Each 100 Supremes are one echelon, a total of 10 echelons, and a total of 1,000 Supremes are stationed in the cracks. As more scouts rushed out of the cracks, and frictions increased from small to large, every monk was vaguely aware that the worldwide catastrophe battle was about to start. At the same time, Bloodwave Supreme did not forget to complete the previous deployment of Jian Wushuang. The two dragons, the dragon clan who had just been promoted to the semi-ancestor level, and the two Dragonkis led the team and kept clearing the vagrants stationed in the divine universe. The systems practiced by the two sides of the universe are different, and the restriction of virtual forces has also caused the virtual men of the virtual universe to go too far. This also greatly saves time and the degree of casualties. After processing all the things, the Supreme Master of Bloodwaves got tired from the base camp so far. He hasn't rested much for more than 1,000 years. Even the semi-ancestor's body is a bit sick. The Heavenly Supreme and the Great Axe accompanied him. You said, how long will it take for the Master of the Wushuang Palace to wake up from Go Sit? Tian Yao Supreme said. The Great Axe shook his head. It's hard to say. Invincible Supreme is a genius, with the horrible qualifications of the Master of the Wushuang Palace. I'm afraid it will be more difficult to break through than us. Bloodwave Supreme laughed. Both of you guessed wrong. In my opinion, there are at most 2 years left, and the Master of the Shuangsong Palace can wake up. Looking at the extremely bloodless Supreme, the two nodded with smiles. Sure enough, in the second year of the scene, the sword unparalleled sitting under the wordless monument suddenly wake up. The long-flowing river of godlike patterns is flowing like a clear stream of air, translating into billions of stars. The unclear road rules in the battlefield outside the territory are reshaped, and Baoguang rises around the sword unparalleled. The dim and broken void was rarely clear for a moment, and a special rule of avenue blessed him. In the base camp, all the invincible Supremes, at this moment, all looked at the scene that washed up the lead. Every invincible Supreme was shocked. They clearly remembered how terrible the thunder and punishment that came when they were first admitted to the invincible Supreme, and they would be embarrassed in the carelessness of promotion. But why is this promotion to invincible Supreme different from their methods? As if the emperor was crowned, the supreme divine punishment of thunder, and thunder turned into a monstrous divine power slowly falling, and the vast divine power Huamen was bathed in 1,000,000 miles around. At this moment, all the magic weapons worn by monks trembled slightly like worship. Looking at the figure hanging in the sky like a round sun, everyone who knew the sword without a smile smiled. This guy who has stood up to adversity and ran all the way so far has really not disappointed anyone. Belonging to the invincible Supreme Avenue, Jian Wushuang's dazzling divine pattern slowly restrained. Standing with Lan Lan in all coldness, seeing this scene, could not help tears. It was his husband and his pride. As the divine power slowly dissipated, the frost was too cold to hold back, ready to rush forward. However, a magnificent flaming figure took the lead in front of Jian Wushuang and cast a gratifying and admiring look. Cold as frosty eyes, footsteps stayed where they were. What are you doing? Don't you want your husband? Lan Lan on the side chuckled, then grabbed the frosty wrist and rushed to Xiangjin Wushuang with everyone. Sure enough, I didn't let this seat down. It was just 1,000 years before I could break through the invincible realm. It was really a monster. Feng Qi nodded with satisfaction. Jian Wushuang smiled slightly. It's a fluke. Feng Qi also said, in the beginning, you could suppress the semi-ancestors in a half-step invincible supreme state. Now it is invincible supreme, isn't it? I don't think it has changed as much as you think, Jian Wushuang said. While talking, the life shrine, the Dragon and Phoenix clan, and some powerful monks gathered. Looking at so many monks now, Jian Wushuang did not respond for a moment. Bloodwave Supreme laughed, and then meticulously explained what happened over the past 1,500 years to Jian Wushuang. Until the final words, Jian Wushuang slowly returned to God, whispered, "This is the monks assembled, the monks of the divine universe." The few people remaining in the Temple of Life were all filled with emotion, from the beginning of the single tree, to the joining of the Dragon and Phoenix clan, and now to the assembly of nearly 5 million monks. Everything is like a dream to Jian Wushuang. He never dared to expect this situation, and his heart was surging for a while. 5 million monks assembled here just to break through under the weight of the virtual universe. The nearly 200,000 Supreme Masters are almost all the chi of the divine universe. This battle cannot be lost, nor can it be lost. But among the monks who gradually gathered in front of the monument, a slight commotion suddenly sounded, and then the crowd gradually separated to the sides, leaving a way. The 2 strong breaths made everyone look down. Chapter 46:33. The 2 statures that came slowly were breathtaking and restrained, and the statures were all hidden under the wide black robe. With only one glance, Jian Wushuang clearly felt that these 2 figures were semi-ancestors. The atmosphere in front of the monument was condensed, and the needle drop was audible. Bloodwave Supreme is also a little dazed. He doesn't know when there are 2 semi-ancestors in the assembled monk army. Judging by the surging breath, I'm afraid it wasn't for the congratulations. Bloodwave Supreme did not neglect and hurried forward to the front road. Who are the 2? The 2 reached down and pulled down their hoods at the same time, each showing an old face. The light is the light, the short is the waist. The 2 oldest elders spoke at the same time. Their voices were slightly muffled. They are really too old, as if the chaos had only existed since the beginning of the day, and the blood wave almost couldn't find the breath they didn't deliberately hide. We are the old friends of the universe. We should have entered the cycle already, but in the end we couldn't rest assured. We borrowed some chi from the universe to wish our last strength. The 2 old men spoke at the same time. Their voices were peaceful. Jian Wushuang heard the words and arched, "Thank you 2 old elders for their help, and the Palace of Life is grateful." The 2 elders bowed their heads slightly, turning their gaze from Bloodwave Supreme to him. "Are you the master of the Palace of Life?" Sword Wushuang nodded. "You can reach the invincible and supreme state at this age, and the afterlife is awesome." The thinner Xiangqing old man nodded, but he immediately turned his head. "But the old man thought that you led the Palace of Life. To lead the next the war was not a good move." As soon as the words came out, people who knew each other with swordsman Wu Jian looked at him. The Emperor Jinwu and Emperor Taishu were all looking at him from the wall, watching how he dealt with it. Jian Wushuang didn't care and laughed. "What do the old seniors think?" "It's very simple. The Lord of the Palace of Life shrine was surrendered and was won by the semi-ancestors in this seat," said the relatively sturdy Xiangliang. Jian Wushuang heard the words and did not speak. Feng Qi, the ancestor of the Feng tribe, even chuckled. "I quit and did not participate in the competition of Lao Zizi." When the Dragon Emperor came to the river, the same should be said. At present, the dragon enemy does not want to participate in that unnecessary competition. In my opinion, the responsibility of the shrine is left to the master of the warrior's palace. The 2 half-ancestors, Longyu and Longqi, also took a step back and stood behind the Emperor Linha. When Bloodwave Supreme opened his mouth with the light and desolate old man, he had no good feelings. He pressed his heart into anger and said coldly, The Lord of the Wushuang Palace is the successor designated by the previous Lord of the Dalian Palace. No one can change this. At one time, 5 of the 7 semi-ancestors on the field rejected directly, and the 2 old men, who are light and desolate, are still calm. This battle is about the life and death of the divine universe. As an old friend of the God of God, I will never watch the divine universe interrupt in his hand, so the old man must never don't budge. He is just an invincible supreme. Although he is extremely talented, he looks like an ant in the eyes of the semi-ancestors. Not to mention that the virtual universe has real ancestors like the virtual God. How much can he play? Strength is an insurmountable sound of nature. The low voice cut through the entire battlefield outside the region, and the 2 were in the light of the other and directly released the breath that belongs to the semi-ancestor class. For a time, nearly 1 million monks gathered in front of Wubi Bay, all infected by the words of the 2. Yeah, even if his roots are even better, after all, he is only an invincible supreme. Even the semi-ancestors may not be able to take over. How can he lead the magical universe to win this battle? After hearing the last sentence of the 2, Feng Qi couldn't help but laugh out loud. And the other half-ancestors were also full of weird faces. Between all realms is a ridge of gully, but Jian Wushuang is obviously not in this list. Even if Feng Qi, who has already achieved a semi-ancestor level, first thought of Jian Wushuang when confronting Jian Wushuang for the first time, it was not but how to escape. The scene where the daring half-step invincible state shakes the virtual is too shocking. However, Jian Wushuang did not respond very much. After listening to these words, he slowly said, "Old senior, what if I don't give up my place in the palace?" The old man will only force you to make way. Afterwards, the 2 most pure and powerful divine powers emerged, and the divine power belonging to the semi-ancestor class shocked most monks in an instant. Don't blame the old man. The old man just doesn't want to see the divine power universe going to destruction. Xiang Qing and Xiang Lu said in the same voice. When the blood wave reached the words, when he was about to take a step, he was stopped by Jian Wushuang. "I will handle it properly, rest assured." After that, Jian Wushuang took a step forward, and the vast and mighty spirit of the invincible realm also surged up. The rising divine power turned out to be faint and light, and the 2 Lu Xiang resisted each other. In this case, the main sword of the Palace of Life is unparalleled and willing to be taught. The 2 didn't talk much, they set foot on the line, and the power of the semi-ancestors was heavy toward Jian Wushuang. Nearly 1 million monks gathered voluntarily yielded, leaving a large void. Dare to cope with the existence of the semi-ancestors in the invincible realm. Is that kid crazy? The pupil of Emperor Taishu condensed suddenly and couldn't believe what he was about to see. With 1 enemy in 2, is there no problem with Jian Wushuang? The overlord was shocked and murmured softly, "At this moment, everyone has determined the final situation in their hearts. Only the disciples of Life Shrine who participated in that war had a look of indifference, as if they had seen through the ending." Bloodwave Supreme said quietly, "Stop fighting with war may be the best choice right now." The 2 semi-ancestral breaths of the sharp edge, once locked up, locked the sword's retreat, and strive to defeat it in one way. Wushuang's verdant green vine is centered on 2 people. Yu reads www.okanshu.com spreads around all of a sudden, and it is built by their dojo field. In this area, enemies can be cut substantially directly. The sword has no 2-sided color and calmness. Looking at the scene right now, I couldn't help but hook the corner of my mouth. A layer of dim and imperceptible breath quietly climbed over the entire void. The gifted magical power of the sword, unparalleled, the primitive universe, has concealed everyone's eyes. today's gifted supernatural powers. And even the rest of the supernatural powers have been retempered by Jian Wushuang in this 1,000 years of enlightenment. Even the strongest ancestors still fell into the field of sword unparalleled. For the magical universe, we must not keep our hands. Be careful. Xiang Qingshun said, while a huge vine sprang up from the realm, rushing towards the sword Wushuang. Chapter 46:34. The divine power rising from the sky is like a mountain overturning. Even the invincible supreme here is subconsciously taking a half step back to avoid spreading to himself. It's time to end, Taishu Emperor whispered, but then the most unwilling scene in that heart appeared. I saw Jian Wushuang still standing in place, exhaling a mighty Taro sword with a mighty sword. Door dash, with a slight whistle, the mountain-like vine split directly into the middle. Jian Wushuang didn't stay at all, stood up directly, holding the Tai Luo divine sword in his hand, facing the two who were light and the two were desolate, suddenly cut off. The majestic and vast sword-like tears of the void, like a giant wave, fell directly. The two waved their hands at the same time, and numerous vines formed barriers to stop them. How Feng Jian easily tore off nearly 100 layers of barriers, and then gradually dispersed. Sword Wushuang turned back and stood with his hands, looking calm, look at each other lightly and stare at each other, and then condensed, being able to be the lord of the palace of life at this age. It really has some skills, but your skills are still not enough for us. More immense divine power surging, impregnating the divine powers of countless chaos ages, more inclusive and broad, the intangible half-ancestor's breath surging into the void, transfiguring the transparent chain vines, twitching toward the sword unparalleled like a punishment. Taking a deep breath, he retracted the sacred sword again, carrying his hands to face the heavenly punishment, step by step towards the light and the desert. The chain vine carrying the might of heaven and earth slammed heavily on Jian Wushuang's body, and the imaginary body disappeared. Each hit had a semi-ancestor's full blow, leaving no trace of him at all. Huang God pattern emerges from the sword's unparalleled body, and the purple Sichuan word demon anomalies in the eyebrows. Xiang Qingxiang can't believe that this guy, who is just invincible, how could he be able to withstand the whipping in their field? Even the semi-ancestors are afraid to do this. Maybe I don't want to waste any more time. Jian Wushuang is holding the sky with one hand, and the heavenly gate of one is coming. Quality Realm Tianmen, which is more solid than before, seems to really exist. The divine power projected from each beam seems to be the most fiery day. All monks are watching this scene in shock. That is not the power that Invincible Supreme can radiate, or even the semi-ancestors may not be able to comprehend it. After seeing the vast expanse that was discovered in the splendid sky gate, Xiangqing and Xianghuang gave up the resistance directly and looked at the sword unparalleled. The light of the polar day let all monks in front of the inscriptionless tablet close their eyes subconsciously. When the polar day disappeared, everything was over. Jian Wushuang stood in front of Xiang Qingxiang and arched with a smile, "Thank you for your mercy." Xiangqing and Xianghuang have not recovered from the shock, and at the same time whispered, "Why, can you master the ancestral art in an invincible and supreme state?" Jian Wushuang did not have any concealment, saying, "That's because God of the earth gave me all his life's insights before he left." So it is, so it is. The two groaned for a long time before finally getting ready to leave. The two old predecessors stayed. Jian Wushuang stopped them. "The divine power universe needs you. I urge you to stay and defend the enemy together." Xiang Qingxiang looked at each other and then smiled. "It is natural. Even if you drive the old man away, the old man will definitely not leave the extraterritorial battlefield. This is our destiny." Looking at the two figures who fled away, Jian Wushuang, not without emotion. The battlefield outside the world is dead, but the eyes of every monk are scorching, and the master of the Palace of Life, who can shake two semi-ancestor-level strong men in an invincible state, hits each monk invisibly. Agent Strongheart Needle. It turns out that the divine universe really has hope. My God, boss, you are too great. The Overlord flew directly from a distance, and Jian came to bear hug fiercely. Jian Wushuang smiled. Sooner or later, you can do it. The following patriarch ancestor, White Ape, directly pulled the Overlord from Jian Wushuang, without good airs. You kid, you will always be so rude. Isn't it that I can't help seeing the boss? The Overlord smirked. The White Ape was sighing with emotion. It has only been tens of thousands of years without seeing him, and the Lord of Wushuang Palace has grown up to this day. It is really a blessing for the divine universe. Jian Wushuangdo. The White Ape is superb, the war is coming, and Jianmo can only do his best to improve himself. The White Ape nodded, then glanced left and right, and whispered, How do you have a chance of winning against the falsehood? Jian Wushuang stunned, and then smiled bitterly. No one in Chengdu, and now I can only guarantee that I can retreat from his hands. The White Ape apparently responded too, and patted his head awkwardly. Look at my head, it's almost getting old. Jian Wushuang knew the anxieties of the ancestors of the White Apes, and then groaned, and then said, The White Ape is supreme, and rest assured that when the of emptiness comes, someone will deal with it. The White Ape nodded supremely and stopped questioning. He never doubted Jian Wushuang's words. After half a day of embarrassment with everyone, Jian Wushuang entered the base camp. At this moment, more than 1,500 years have passed since he sat under the wordless monument, and the premonition that the catastrophe is imminent is getting stronger and stronger. Listening to the constant news from the garrison in the cracks, Jian Wu's eyes sink like water. Just as he was going to take a trip to the cracks, the urgent training from the first echelon rang through the giant hall. Listening to that sharp training, everyone's mood fell to the bottom of the valley instantly. This kind of urgent training is the highest level, indicating that the virtual universe has already invaded. Is this day finally here? Pressing the agitation in the heart, Jian Wushuang slowly walked out of the hall. Everyone was dignified, and the monks in dozens of cities gathered silently in front of the base camp, like a bit of spark gathering. Nearly 5 million monks looked like a sculpture. None of them flinched, staring into the dark abyss. Jian Wushuang finally looked back at the countless monks who were crushing the sky, and added the voice of divine power, resounding completely in the sky of the sky. All glory we do today. A short sentence completely ignited the hearts of all monks. Everything that is in mind is vain. A variety of strong divine powers soared into the sky. A total of 5 million monks condensed the fortunes of various star domains, and at this moment exudes the most magnificent divine power. The void in the whole extraterrestrial battlefield is trembling. This time, the battle of the Holocaust may be the last one. Chapter 46:35. Divine power poured freely into the void. Headed by Jian Wushuang, the 5 million strong monks gathered in the cracks and made their best in one battle. Stepping on the outermost side of the extraterrestrial battlefield, an equally majestic force is permeating. There are 10 columns in total. At the moment, nearly 8 branches have fallen, and more than 10 ordinary supremes are fleeing desperately. Behind them, nearly 100 vanities who act as scout pioneers are struggling to kill. The sword has no double-sided color and is cold. Suddenly, the void rose, and a huge palm print killed the hundreds of traces of vanity directly. All monks were shocked. They shot hundreds of vanity in one palm. I'm afraid the semi-ancestors couldn't do it, Emperor Taishu and Emperor Jinwu all looked at the figure under the black robe with a complex look. In just tens of thousands of years, he has grown to the existence that he needs to look up to. When the virtual forces dissipated as much as possible, the more than 10 Supremes hurriedly ran to the front of Jian Wushuang. One of the older elders panicked and said, "Wushuang Palace Lord, the big thing is bad, the void crack has cracked, and they have already attacked from the crack." Jian Wushuang heard his words frown, and then rushed forward, with more than 5 million monks behind him. Void fissures are located at the junction of the divine universe and the unreal universe. In that mysterious zone, both the divine and virtual powers are weak. When the forces of the divine universe rushed to the junction, all the monks could not help but take a breath. I saw that at the junction of the crack and enchantment, a celestial abyss had been cracked smoothly to both sides, just like the heavenly gate of heaven, and countless vain forces escaped. The black army of vain soldiers, like the dark fog covering the sky, emerged from the cracks of the door that day. Those old friends also appeared. Surging in a black mist, the 8 desolate lords led more than 200,000 scouts and looked away from each other with the sword unparalleled. 200,000 scouts. There are nearly 50,000 traces of vanity. Their role is to act as a sharp knife, fiercely into the heart of the divine universe. The 2 half-ancestors who were almost killed by Jian Wushuang with their own power in the past were now crushed by the dark army of virtual soldiers. Meet the blood feud, the 8 desolate emperor and that 2-in-1 deceit, almost anxious to directly kill the sword without twining to pieces. However, these are not over yet. The endless stream of virtual men is boundless, as if connected to the sky, stepping out of the virtual universe. The immense pressure was on every monk's heart, but no one took a half step back, silent and dead. On the top of the army of virtual soldiers, the virtual transformed from hundreds of millions of virtual forces seemed like a demon to come into the world, and the star-like red eyes penetrated 9 days and 10 places and looked at Jian Wushuang. And on the side of the virtual god, a shocking virtual shadow also condensed. With the black mist surging down, a majestic treasurer wearing a black gold suit and crown on his head appeared. Jian Wushuang's eyes synced fiercely, and that was just a glance in the starfish realm to scare the eternal emperor. And now it is also here. The 2 ancestors straddled the world, and their appearance almost made all monks despair. Next, the one with 6 arms of rules swarming behind him, with 6 members of the swarming organization coming at the same time. 3 ancestors, the supreme existence of the supreme. 3 in the camp of the virtual universe appeared 3. The heavens and earth changed, and even when it first came, it shattered the void. There is no place to hold 3 ancestors. At this moment, even Jian Wushuang's heart felt a sense of weakness. The ancestor is the existence that truly surpasses the rules, and even the semi-ancestors can hardly cause any harm to it. The 3 ancestors are really terrible. Is it innocent to die, my magical universe? At this moment, all the monks were already frustrated. Taking a deep breath, Jian Wushuang took the lead to release the vast divine power, and the unmatched divine power swayed up with the divine pattern, but it was the faint barrier of the invading virtual force. At the same time, the Feng tribe Fengqi, the dragon tribe Linha the dragon emperor, the blood wave is supreme, the phase is light, and the phase is deserted. At this moment, a total of 7 half-ancestors release the divine treasure. The emptiness is magnificent, and the divine power belonging to the divine universe has blossomed a tough side at this moment, along with the surging divine power. Lao Zun took a step forward, and a black water treasure that shook the sky transformed from behind him. A strange but majestic energy dissipates the imaginary force that is dissipated almost instantly. All monks looked at this scene in shock, and then their hot but fierce eyes rose again. It turns out that our divine power universe also has ancestors. The ancestral ancestor White Ape's eyes were reddish, and at the same time, the divine power that belonged to the invincible supreme peak rose. Emperor Tixus' normal and angry face also slightly raised the corners of his mouth. After seeing the statue of the elder respect, Yao Yao stared at the scarlet eyes, and everything that he had experienced in the polar starfish rushed into his heart again. Did he get abandoned from there too? There is no answer. The opponent in the bite heart is not Lao Zun. As early as when he set foot on this extraterrestrial battlefield, he locked Jian Wushuang. The terrible growth of this monster finally made it feel unusual for devouring even the devouring organization. However, today's battle, Jian Wushuang must die. That day, he escaped from the hands of Lao Zun, and the virtual was able to recover. His inner fear caused him to confront Lao Zun in the first time, and the emperor who has been manipulating behind the scenes so far, looks a little weird in the eyes of Lao Zun. For a time, the cold and damaged regional diplomatic circles gathered the full power of the two sides of the universe. This will be the most expansive Bloomberg battle since chaos. Whether it is the defeating party or the defeating party, it will certainly pay a terrible price. Here, if I return, I will let you go all the way, otherwise it will inevitably die here. Hong Zhongdalu's voice resounded from the mouth of Shushan. He was high above him, carrying an endless evil spirit in his magnificence. But no one in the divine universe responded. Everyone had a dead heart in their eyes, and scoffed at the words of the virtual god. Will the skin be attached, without hair? Survival of the cold, when the magical universe is completely occupied, and anyone will just be a plaything tortured at will. Sword Wushuang laughed loudly, showing disdain in a pair of pure golden eyes. Below tier, tirelessly and invariably occupy my divine power universe for trillions of years. Everyone knows the ugly heart. Now, it is before the two armies' persuasion is indeed despicable. The sword has no double character like a knife, cut to the entire virtual universe. The false sank and waved his hand to lower the punishment. Chapter 46:36. The void collapsed, and the blow with great terror power went straight to the sword without a cover. Jian Wushuang did not dodge, but directly held up the sky with one hand to meet the horrific blow of the virtual god. The red gold divine power collided with the dark imaginary force, and everyone just felt that the void under their feet was trembling, and they all stared forward. The imaginary result did not appear. Jian Wushuang has been as stable as Ding Haitian needle, and he was destroyed by him directly. All the monks were boiling, and Feng Qi's ancestors were even more surprised. The sword, unparalleled sword that could barely resist the false gods before, was even more scary now, and his growth eventually made the three ancestors strong guards. I can't stay here. The army of sprawling vain forces has been assembled, and the tragic song is about to ring in the remote battlefield. With the Taro Excalibur raised high by the sword without hands, the monks behind him took the lead in launching the attack. The endless divine power turned into an arrow that is difficult to turn back, and nailed it into the army of Su Shi's army. This is the battle of the most extreme divine power and ineffective power. A total of 7.5 ancestors released their realms in the first place. Feng Qi turned into a giant phoenix covering the sky, with a clear voice, carrying thousands of children of the phoenix family, resolutely charged. The most fierce nirvana of the world between heaven and earth spread among the army of virtual soldiers. Anyone who is contaminated by flames, even the six-marked virtual lord, is destroyed in it. The Linha Dragon Emperor re-illusioned the Dragon of the Destiny, and each time his body flipped, it was enough to tear the sky and destroy one realm. As if the claws of the giant pillars descended, hundreds of traces of vanity turned into blood mist. Blood waves supreme vibrated his arms. Countless blood shadows quietly covered the void, as in the quagmire field, and any vanity in this blood shadow field was unknowingly weakened. Heavenly Supreme, Great Axe Supreme, Patriarch White Ape, Emperor Taishu, Emperor Jinwu, a top powerful man with 1,000,000 chaotic era, led the monk army and developed along the semi-ancestor level Blood Avenue, resolutely rushed into the army of Su Shi. This was the most terrible death battle. There was no second way except for one party's death. Jian Wushuang is in the forefront of the monk army, and he is full of sacred lines, and his huge treasure protects the monks below him. The invisible sword emerged from his right palm. Wushuang Kendo, Xinghe Lake, high sword rises to the sky. The vast stars and the galactic galaxy are all blooming in this star-shaped sword at this moment. This sword is broken from ancient times to modern times, which brings him too much wantonness and misery. This sword is awe-inspiring. It is his sword Wushuang's own Kendo. The ancestor must also lower my eyebrows when I see. The indescribable Kendo is swept across the void, pointed to by the sword front. Hundreds of miles are my territory. This style directly turned 100,000 virtual men into fly ash, cut out a road soaked with blood and covered with corpses. Originally, he was going to block Jian Wushuang's Bite 1, but he hasn't acted yet. The black water treasure is floating in front of the three ancestors. Come together. Lao Zun looked at them indifferently, concisely. Su Shin suddenly sank. Look for death. At the end of the story, supreme ancestor strength rose to the sky, and countless secretive runes emerged from the body of the Xian Shun. At the same time, 2 chains of engraved streamer runes were smashed from the back of the virtual god, carrying the power of the broken void to the old respect. At the same time, Yen Yi also moved, and the 6 regular arms behind him turned into virtual light, pressing down towards Lao Zun. The crown above his head was calm until the terrible Bite Emperor, and he also shot at the same time. A black beam that was almost to the extreme suddenly shot out of the sleeve of his black gold suit. 3 ancestral offensives overwhelmed Lao Zun. Under the attack, the nether sky dome was broken, and the ripples of destruction caused the starry void to collapse. Facing this killing offensive, Lao Zun's gaze turned from the previous indifference to the dignified. The Blackwater scepter turned into a ripple barrier, blocking directly in front of him. The 3 devastating offensives disappeared like mud cows into the sea. Lao Zun raised his hand to remove the barrier, and a pair of completely black pupils directly locked Bit 1. Persimmons must be softly pinched, and people must be weak. Due to the constraints of the Avenue rules, Lao Zun must break through the blockade and containment as soon as possible under the limits of his own endurance. The one that has just been promoted to the ancestor is the best choice. Eyed by Lao Zun, the past came to my heart again, and even the arm of the rule that grew back behind was faintly hurt. I swallowed a bit of jealousy in the bottom of my eyes, but more crazy. Even if I am not alone against you, but now 3 people overwhelm you, can you still have a way to live? After taking a look at the Emperor, the 3 ancestors directly fought with Lao Zun. The supreme ancestral power caused a vision of heaven and earth. A rare tide of energy swept the entire battlefield. There were weak monks and virtual men who died when their hearts broke. The 3 ancestors of the virtual universe were entangled by the old one, and the battlefield of the half-ancestors completely tilted towards the divine universe, holding the Taro Excalibur on the left and the swordless pair of invisible longswords on the right. The damage caused is unimaginable. Only Jian Wushuang directly destroyed the army of vanguards who acted as pioneer scouts. A total of 200,000 vanguards and 50,000 vanities. None survived. looking at the figure that turned the tide, like the patron saint of divine power. The hearts of all monks were fiery. The belief we can win as long as the sword is unparalleled begins to be firm in the hearts of every monk. The giant phoenix covering the sky circled on his side, and the five-clawed dragon emperor walked side by side with him. At this moment, the sword was blocked in front of all monks like the true guardian deity, until the emergence of Bahwang Shuzuan barely blocked the pace of Jian Wushuang. He has taken that step completely, and there is a faint breakthrough to the top of the barren emptiness, even with his two members of the Bite organization, at the same time besieging sword, unparalleled. Jian Wushuang, all the shame you imposed on this seat today, this seat will be returned 10 times. The low and dark voice resounded from the mouth of 8 Desolation. The strong breath of the semi-ancestors peaked almost instantly. Jian Wushuang sneered, and the taro sword in his hand pointed directly at Bahwang. This time, what I want is not just your arm, but a complete head. Sword unparalleled. Yuit, the 8 desolate angers, the humiliation of the past, and the new revenge directly led him to rush to the sword, unparalleled. Standing in place, Jian Wushuang raised his lips slightly, and the blood wave supreme had released the bleeding shadow field behind him. You have a head on this item. Let's find out today. In the chaotic void, the blood shadow field violently trembled, and countless hands suddenly hooked, firmly holding the 8 desolate emperor. Chapter 46:37. The rushing 8 desolation emperor was directly caught in it, and the fierceness on his face had not even had time to retreat. A sharp edge, a sudden shock. Bahwang Shuzuan only felt that his neck was cold, and his eyes suddenly darkened. Just picking up the invisible sword on the right hand, the sharp and hardly noticeable sword intention swept out, and directly cut off the neck of Bahwang Shuzuan. The head fell so good that the sword Wushuang reached out and shook his hands away, which directly destroyed the head of Bahwang Shuozhen. And his headless corpse was devoured by the blood of the supreme blood shadow realm, and the gods were destroyed. All that happened was, in an instant, when the 2 members of the phagocytosis group reacted, the 8 desolate respects had perished. It's too fast. Just a blow that can't be seen clearly killed a semi-ancestor peak. This monster with only invincible supremacy, how can it be done? Both members of the phagocytosis group looked at Xiang Jianwushuang in shock at the same time. Since you don't want to leave them all. The indifferent voice sounded like a life-saving note, resounding from Jian Wushuang's mouth. Returning from the shock, the 2 members of the phagocytosis looked at each other and shot 6 cards directly at the sword Wushuo. Cards with a special metallic luster seem to have a strange magic power, and the space where they pass is swallowed and smoothed. Jian Wu's eyes were frozen, and the pattern burst directly around his body, shattering the flying card. However, 2 cards escaped the explosion and covered the monk army. Nearly 20 invincible supremes and more than 500 top extremes, because they did not dodge, were instantly sealed in the card. After waiting for Jian Wushuang to block his hand, the 2 cards that directly sealed nearly 1,000 supreme masters automatically shattered, leaving no chance for rescue. That weird way of killing is really terrible. Even if the invincible supreme is a little careless, it will be sealed. Jian Wushuang was furious and angered, and directly used the ancestral power world gate, which was about to wipe out the swallowing organization. The magnificent sky gate emerges, and the giant sky finger comes. How can the 2 members of the ancestral organization, both of whom are semi-ancestors, not feel the ancestral breath of them, and even prepare to escape? But soon they discovered that under the cover of that type of ancestral art, all retreats around them were blocked by the invisible enchantment. The great terror between life and death poured out from the bottom of his heart. No, you can't kill us. We will be even worse when we die. By then, Lord Devourer will make your magical universe pay your life." Jian Wushuang heard the words. His face did not fluctuate at all, the one-sided giant fingers still covered. The two members of the phagocytosis did not even send out a scream, and they both burst into a mist of blood. The slaying of the three ancestors in succession has temporarily relieved some pressure. However, the war between monks and virtual men is still not optimistic. The Xushi are just an accompanying false explosion, which has opened up the realm. Ordinary Supreme is almost a deadly situation against the previous one, which is equivalent to the Supreme explosion in order to exert its power, which almost directly affects the battle situation. The 2-for-1 and 1-for-1 situation make the divine universe look good, but the situation is not optimistic. Up to now, the casualties of monks in the divine universe have broken through millions. The army of the virtual universe, with the semi-ancestors such as Jian Wushuang, Fengqi, Linhe Longdi, and other ancestors, has been swept away by siege, and the casualties are still far greater than the magical universe. Just Lao Zun alone is the three ancestors who dragged the virtual universe into a blunder, which is very important to the divine universe. If there is no old respect, even if there are dozens of ancestors in the divine universe, it will be almost impossible to escape. Jian Wushuang looked up at the back of Lao Zun gratefully, then completely let go of his hands and feet, killing the living force of the virtual universe. Above the void sky, the defeated terrorists showed the most primitive state, and the raging floated. There, even semi-ancestors dare not to get involved easily. Just the aftermath revealed by the 4 ancestors is enough to hang any semi-ancestors. The 3 ancestors encircled. Looking at this guy who couldn't tell whether he was young or old, he was completely shocked. The ancestral offensive that was usually enough to destroy everything, when it struck the Lao Zun, could hardly cause any harm. He seemed to be beyond the bounds of all rules, thus causing them to reduce their dimensionality. The arm of the rule behind, Yan Yi has already been cut off 3. If it were not for the Emperor's care, Lao Zun could kill him almost every time he shot. What kind of existence is he in order to survive in the hands of the Emperor Devourer, who is equally powerful beyond his imagination? Is he, like the Emperor, also a master of the rules? The more I thought about it, the more I was shocked. With a little loss of mind, Lao Zun reached out and punched out a black light, which destroyed the big hole in the belly of I, seeing that the Emperor, who had been walking around, raised his hand and sent him away from the circle. The situation around the 3-in-1 was instantly turned into the 2-in-1, and it had almost been defeated against the hypothesis of Lao Zun's most offensive. Emperor! Su Shen called out the name of Emperor Shen in a deep voice, suppressing dissatisfaction in her tone. The Emperor Eater didn't say much, and a huge chess game with a handful of palms in his hands appeared above the 3 men's heads. The strange energy transmitted in that game, even the old Supreme could not help but delay the offensive slightly. In the densely packed chess game, stars began to flow day by day, which seemed to have spawned countless celestial kingdoms. And in each side of the astral fuckingdom, there are countless energy surges, and the divine punishment that has turned the world into a lament. At the moment when the top chess game reduced the divine punishment, even if the top was like a false god, it barely emerged from it. The extermination fell off with punishment and bombardment, and burst completely with the old statue as the center. At this moment, the entire extraterrestrial battlefield has collapsed as a result. The darkest gale in the universe whistling out of the broken void, these terrible gale winds are for monks in the ultimate dominating realm, and starry sky in terms of soldiers, it is the deadliest. Wherever feng shui passed, ordinary monks and star-studded monks disappeared instantly and could not even make a sound. Jian Wushuang had anticipated that when he shouted loudly, "Defense!" all the monks in the extraterrestrial battlefields, no doubt there is him directly converted the divine power into a guardian and fit together. Countless divine barriers rose up, a rare truce across the battlefield, and a weird death. Kill. Nearly 54 marked virtual princes violently rise, ready to surprise, and were killed by sword Wushuang in one palm. His blood-filled eyes carried his mighty power, slowly sweeping through the restless army of virtual soldiers, and the vain priests being glanced back almost subconsciously. Chapter 46:38. At this moment, both monks and vain men reluctantly resisted in that terrible, dark, howling wind, looking at the emperor from the side. A complex of meaning that was difficult to understand emerged under the eyes of Shushan, and then it was depressed. The horrific punishment from the star chess game poured out on Lao Zun. These barriers, which were transformed from the black water, could no longer block the infinite power, and all the light and darkness in sight were swallowed up. Jian Wushuang trembled in his heart, directly urging his figure to prepare to support the old respect. Feng Qi grabbed it and said hurriedly, "You are dead, UCA NT change any results if you go there." Jian Wushuang knew the meaning of Feng Qi's words well, but his and his companions' deaths these days have gone far beyond ordinary feelings, even if they are prepared to give them whatever they want. Click-dash, the crisp, crackling sound suddenly resounded from the very center of the divine punishment, and then a huge arm like Xinghe broke the sky divine punishment and slammed into the emperor and the ethereal. The two eyes fixed, and each raised their hands to resist. Under the bombardment of this huge arm like Xinghe, even the ancestors retreated 1,000,000 miles away. The dark void was broken, so that it could no longer be broken, and the escaped dark matter filled every inch of space. While far away, the injured Yanzi recovered and hurried to rush to the emperor. That blow slowly retracted the arms of the two giant ancestors who had retreated from the ancestors, and at the same time held the big palm away and shattered the star falling chessboard directly. Lao Zun's figure was proud and independent, and the majestic black water treasure behind him slowly opened his eyes. The eyes are like two long rivers of black water that run through the ages. The vast and barren atmosphere makes everyone feel their own smallness, just like a drop in Taizong. At this moment, even the mysterious and calmly eaten emperor cannot calm down. The virtual was terrified and immediately released his ancestor. I saw a demon who awakened from the unknown wilderness, sitting in the dark, and his eyes were as big as a star field. At the same time, on the body of this demon, 6 ancient chains engraved with scarlet runes were bound, and they were extremely embarrassing. This demon, who seems to be bound by the rules of heaven, is the ancestor of the virtual god. The extreme evil black flame came out of the devil's mouth full of fangs and slammed into the black water river. At the same time, the Emperor Eater also shot, and a black gold crown was thrown from his sleeve by him and smashed straight. Biting his teeth, Yen Yi also rose, and the only 3 regular arms behind him turned into spears. The combined strike of the 3 ancestors, this extraterritorial battlefield, was originally the weakest and most chaotic place in the universe and could not bear it at all. The space outside the battlefield began to shatter toward the cave. 3 ancestral offensives, with supreme power, finally prevented Lao Zun's endless blow. The shock wave turned into ripples, shaking for 9 days and 10 places. He took a few steps back, opened his mouth, and spit out a blood of God, and the arms of the rules behind him were all broken. The ancestors of the deities behind the virtual gods also cracked. The Emperor Eater raised his hand to take back the black gold crown. His face was finally dignified. Obviously, the power of Lao Zun is beyond their expectations. For a time, the 3 ancestors dare not act rashly. Lao Zun, as before, seems to have not been damaged from beginning to end. The sword Wushuang lowered his mouth slightly, and the Taro sword in his hand held up, "Battle." The glorious divine power emerged from the sky, and the sword, unparalleled, was transformed into kendo, and the battlefield was vertical and horizontal. The army of more than 3 million monks rushed to the army of Sushur again. If it weren't for an extraterrestrial battlefield, I'm afraid no starfield could support such a terrible war. In the previous battle, the two ancestors who were almost killed by Jian Wushuang now faced Jian Wushuang with full of hatred. The Tai Luo divine sword was cut out, but Jian Mang was absorbed strangely. At the same time, the two-in-one strange half-ancestor shook his arms in the air, and an invisible enclave directly covered the sword Wushuang in it. "This time, I want your life." He was completely insane, his mouth screaming constantly. The sword Wushuang was not afraid, and the Tai Luo divine sword released the scorching Shinmang. "Courageous enough, you can take it." With the interweaving of divine power and imaginary power, a broken corpse paves in the void. Above the broken sky, the weakest one in the ancestral ranks has already been completed in this terrible confrontation. The wound that was about to heal in his abdomen was faintly torn. Su Shun felt that the ancestor of the devil behind him had broken to a certain extent, and finally stopped. "You don't belong to the divine universe," Su Shun said, looking at the old statue standing in front of him. Lao Zun whispered, "So what?" Taking a deep breath, the virtual said again, "Since you do not belong to the magical universe, then join my virtual universe. I can agree to you first if you want." "Really?" Lao Zun leaned forward slightly and opened his eyes. "Everything can be promised." Su Shan nodded. "All conditions." "So, I think you're all dead?" Lao Zun opened his eyes suddenly, and the indescribable energy spewed out of his palm turned into thousands of black and black exercises, bound away. "You're looking for death." The false anger drank, and the ancestral demon ancestor behind him suddenly broke the chain bound to his left arm and smashed directly into the old respect. Emperor and Emperor looked at each other, and together urged the figure to face the old statue. The giant arm of the demon ancestor smashed nearly 100 dark horses, and at the same time pressed the old with the virtual god. However, the transfiguration of the dark and black horses was like a living creature which was smashed and emerged continuously. The ancestral deities of Tongtian demon roared, but fell into siege within a short period of time. Lao Zun waved his arms, little by little trapping the false gods. He felt that a strange amount of energy was quickly eating away at his own power, can't help but be frightened. As he was about to explode the ancestors of the demon god, the virtual suddenly felt a chill behind him, and he looked back subconsciously. I saw that EE had already leaped high and issued the most terrifying force in his hand. He did not go towards the old respect, but turned towards his back. The quake in Zuxin's heart suddenly reappeared, the cold and majestic expression. He did his best, and the giant demon ancestor behind him finally broke free of thousands of black horses, and then Tongshan's arm directly grasped the smashing shot. He was about to make a deadly blow to Su Sun, but he was controlled by Su Sun's demon ancestor. He didn't respond at all, and was thrown to Lao Zun directly. "Do not." Holding one's neck with one hand, Lao Zun smiled slightly. His black pupils seemed to have an irresistible power and began to eat away at one's mind. Chapter 46:39. Bloody battle, the void collapsed, and the terrifying blow went straight to Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang did not dodge. Instead, he faced the terrifying attack of Void God with one hand. The golden-red divine power and the dark-black void power collided. Everyone felt the space under their feet shake as they all looked forward. The result that they had imagined did not happen. Jian Wushuang was as stable as a sestabilizing divine needle, and the monstrous void power was destroyed by him directly. All the cultivators were in an uproar. Feng Qi and the other ancestors were even more shocked. In the past, Jian Wushuang could only barely resist Void God's attack. Now, he was even more terrifying. His growth made the three ancestor realm powerhouses wary. This child cannot be left alive. The army that was filled with void energy had finished gathering, and a sad song was about to be heard in the off-world battlefield. As Jian Wushuang raised the Tarot Divine Sword high, the cultivators behind him took the lead to attack. The endless divine power turned into an arrow that could not be turned back and ruthlessly nailed into the camp of the army of void warriors. This was a bloody battle between the peak of divine power and void power. A total of 7 ancestors released their respective domains immediately. Feng Qi turned into a giant phoenix that covered the sky. She let out a clear cry and led the tens of thousands of phoenix clansmen to charge forward. The fiercest and most soul-devouring Nirvana fire domain in the world spread out in the army of void warriors. Anyone who was infected by the flames, even a 6-scar void master, would be destroyed. Dragon Emperor Linha conjured his natal dragon once again. Every time his body flipped, it was enough to tear the sky apart and destroy the world. The dragon claw, which was like a giant pillar supporting the sky, descended, turning hundreds of scar-level void masters into clouds of blood mist. Supreme Shui Bo raised his arm and advanced. Countless blood shadows filled the void like a swamp, and any void master who entered this blood shadow domain would be weakened without them knowing it. Supreme Tian Yi, Supreme Jun Fu, White Ape Overlord Patriarch, Great Void Divine Emperor, and Golden Crow Emperor, all of them were supreme experts who had dominated the world for millions of chaos cycles. They led their armies and followed the path of blood that had been opened up by ancestors, resolutely charging into the army of void warriors. This was the most brutal battle to the death. There was no other way except for the death of one side. Jian Wushuang was at the forefront of the army of cultivators. His body was surging with brilliant divine patterns, and his huge treasure image was protecting the cultivators below him. An invisible sword appeared in his right palm. Wushuang Sword Dao, Star River Lake, sea sword intent rose from the sky. The vast stars and the Star River bloomed in the star-style sword intent. This sword strike had broken the past and the present, and it had gathered too much of his willfulness and dejection. It was an extremely proud move, and it was Jian Wushuang's Sword Dao. Even ancestor realm experts have to lower their heads when they see it. The indescribable swordsmanship suppressed the void. Wherever the sword pointed, hundreds of millions of miles was his territory. This move turned 100,000 void warriors into ashes. A path that was soaked in blood and covered with corpses was cut out. Devour One, who wanted to stop Jian Wushuang, did not move. The black water phantom floated in front of the 3 ancestor realm experts. Attack me together, then. Old Master looked at them indifferently, his words concise. Void God's face darkened. You're looking for death. With that, extreme ancestor realm power surged, and countless mysterious and dark runes emerged from Void God's body. At the same time, 2 chains engraved with flowing light runes smashed out from Void God's back and smashed toward Old Master with the power to shatter the void. At the same time, Devour One also moved. The 6 arms of laws of various colors behind him transformed into illusionary light and pressed down on Old Master. Devouring Emperor, who was wearing his crown and had been calm all this time, made his move at the same time. A black beam of light suddenly shot out from his black and gold robe. 3 ancestor realm attacks suppressed Old Master at the same time. The void was shattered by this attack, and the ripples of destruction caused the void of the star field to collapse. In the face of this destructive attack, Old Master's eyes turned from indifferent to serious. The black scepter in his hand transformed into a rippling barrier, which he used to block the attack. The three destructive attacks were like clay oxen entering the sea, completely dissipating. Old Master lifted his hand to remove the barrier, and his pitch-black eyes locked on Devour One. Persimmons should be picked and pinched, and people should be picked and beaten. Due to the restraints of the rules of the Great Tao, Old Master had to break through the blockade and blockade as soon as possible under the limits of his body. Devour One, who had just reached Ancestor Realm, was the best choice. Seeing Old Master's intense stare, the past came back to his mind again, and even the newly grown arm of laws behind him started to ache. A trace of fear flickered in the depths of Devour One's eyes, but it was more of madness. Even if I can't defeat you by myself, there are 3 of us now. Do you think you can still survive? After exchanging a glance with Devouring Emperor, the 3 of them engaged in close combat with Old Master. The ancestor-level aura caused a phenomenon in the heavens and earth. A rare energy tide swept across the entire battlefield. Some cultivators and void warriors with slightly weaker cultivation, realms died immediately with their hearts shattered. The 3 ancestor realm powerhouses of the void universe were entangled by Old Master, and the battle of the ancestor-level powerhouses was completely tilted toward the divine power universe. With the Tarot Divine Sword in his left hand and the invisible long sword in his right hand, Jian Wushuang's destructive power was beyond imagination. Jian Wushuang alone had annihilated the army of void warriors who had served as the vanguard scouts. There were 200,000 void warriors and 50,000 void masters, but none of them survived. Looking at the figure who had turned the tide, like the guardian of the universe, all the cultivators' hearts were burning. As long as Jian Wushuang is alive, we will win. This belief began to strengthen in the hearts of every cultivator. The sky-covering giant phoenix circled around him, and the 5-clawed dragon emperor walked side by side with him. At this moment, Jian Wushuang stood in front of all the cultivators like a real guardian god. It was not until the appearance of the Ba Huang that Jian Wushuang was barely stopped. Void Master Ba Huang, who had taken the last step and was on the verge of breaking through to the peak, surrounded Jian Wushuang with the 2 members of Devourers. Jian Wushuang, all the humiliation you've imposed on me, I will return it 10 times today. A deep and sinister voice came out of the mouth of the void Master Ba Huang. The powerful aura of a half-ancestor surged almost instantly. Jian Wushuang sneered and pointed the Tarot Divine Sword at the Ba Huang. This time, I'm not only going to take your arm, but your whole head. Jian Wushuang, you deserve to die. Void Master Ba Huang was furious. The humiliation of the past and the new hatred made him charge at Jian Wushuang without any hesitation. Jian Wushuang, who was standing still, smirked. Behind him, Supreme Shuebo had already released the Blood Shadow Domain. It'll end your life today. In the chaotic void, the Blood Shadow Domain shook violently and countless bloody hands grabbed Void Master Ba Huang. Chapter 4640, The Sorrow of the World, and the terrible detonation directly destroyed the extraterrestrial battlefield, and everything was destroyed in the fragmentation. The entire emptiness of the sky was swallowed up by the polar daylight produced by that explosion. Even the Emperor Eater was a subconscious cover. This indescribable polar day lasted for nearly half a cup of tea. Waiting for the dazzling polar day to dissipate, the Emperor Eater hurriedly glanced up at the center of the explosion, but apart from nothingness, there was only a little bit of wreckage and broken arm. "Where are the 2 of them?" asked the Emperor Shen Sheng, and the endless majesty pressed against the of emptiness. Su Shen showed no weakness, and he was in a state of extreme power. Do you think that you can't kill him by me alone? Forbearing in his heart cut off the fierce rage of the virtual god, the emperor urged his body to eagerly investigate in the explosive center. Impossible. Did he really die? The emperor was horrified, but the blow from Su Shin was too horrible, and Lao Zun was seriously injured by his attack, and it was difficult to survive that blow. Thinking of this, the emperor suppressed the anger and suspicion in his heart. He did not look at the virtual god, and cast his eyes downward. There is an army of nearly 3 million magical universes. I do care if he dies or not. It's right now, you ants. The emperor is like a real decision-maker, and directly issues orders over the falsehood, slapping as many as possible, leaving no one. The Su Shi army hesitated for a moment, and then, led by several members of the ancestral organization, rushed to the army of madness. Taking a deep breath, Shin said, "Emperor, you have crossed the border." The emperor heard the words and sneered. "It's just a cosmic order, so you take it to heart? Don't you forget that your own promise was the original." There was a hint of hatred in the bottom of the eyes, and the virtual never spoke again, manipulating the ancestor of the demon behind, and smashing the power of the divine power, Jian Wushuang, and the only ancestor of the divine power universe fell. All the monks of the divine power universe looked at that scene. Without the sword Wushuang, who entered the kendo with one's body, and the army of soldiers with a virtual army like a no man's land, all the monks almost lost their benchmarks and hopes almost instantly. The horrific blow of the demon ancestors directly wiped out more than 200,000 monks, and the supreme divine realm died out countless. The Jinwu tribe, Taishu Temple, all the disciples of Jade Pavilion who came to help, all died. None survive. When the purple hair was supreme and the red ear supreme was about to die, he looked away at the place where Jian Wu twinned. With a smile in his eyes, he quietly went to death after a quiet cherishment. The foundation of the Star Sword sect was destroyed, leaving only Wu Jianxian and a few others to barely escape the disaster. The 3 phoenixes and unicorns were also seriously injured. After the Emperor Eater also joined the battlefield of the slaughter, the forces of the divine universe have already suffered the devastation. Even the semi-ancestors have no resistance at this moment. Cold and frosty, his face looked at the destruction that was approaching. A dash, the huge wings that covered the sky quietly blocked in front of the cold frost, while blocking the aftermath of the ancestor. Feng Qi uttered a terrible cry, and his phoenix was extinguished and turned into a human figure and fell down. Lung Rushuang hurriedly reached out and hugged, and Feng Qi, who fell into his arms, was already shattered with blood on his left side. Old ancestors, a total of more than 200, are the supreme ancestors of the Feng clan. An army of more than 3 million monks, only 1 million remain. The virtual universe is completely insane, and every virtual person is like a bloodthirsty demon, quickly eating away the life of the divine universe. Looking at the battle that was almost a foregone conclusion, Bloodwave Supreme seemed 10 years old at the same time. The hardest thing to say was finally spoken. Everyone who belongs to the divine universe retreats as much as possible and retains the final salary. The face of every monk is extremely pale. With this defeat, the magical universe will no longer exist, and no one can stop the pace of the virtual universe. Here, leave it to the old man to take care of him. The Bloodwave Supreme robe hunted against the wind. His face was not half frightened, only indifferent after seeing through the fortune. A broken snowflake sword was already broken. Laukier pours the last sip of wine from his wine gourd into his throat, and then enters the half-ancestor state. He was silent for a whole life, and he wandered all his life. In the last battle, he finally realized the splendid and magnificent half-ancestor, divine power, emerged, and the old beggar dressed up as a martyr in Bali disappeared, and replaced by a young swordsman with a sword and eyebrows. The divine power universe can't be led by no one, and let you do that kind of thing. The old swordsman, a young swordsman, laughed loudly. It's time to find a place to rest after living so long. A blood-stained Linha Dragon Emperor also took a step forward and said quietly, "Here is the place for us. I would like to ask the blood wavelength to take good care of the magical universe." Long Yen, Long Qi held the blood wave supreme. "Let's go." The supreme power dropped. The old beggar laughed loudly, and a turbulent blue-shirt swordsman transformed himself into a sword, like a long river against the sky. The old beggar shouted with his own body, and finally defeated the virtual god. The sword dissipated like a star, and the divine universe also lost a semi-ancestor. Under the strike of Laukir, all the vanity that crossed the sword waterfall died out. Even the semi-ancestors were evading the frontier and gaining time for the retreat of the divine force. At this moment, on the broken extraterrestrial battlefield, only the Dragon Emperor Linha remained, standing firmly in the distance. Looking at this monk, who is not yet at the peak of his ancestors, the emperor didn't want to, and reached out to kill. However, the falling slap of the sky is hard to reach half an inch in the next moment. As the emperor's eyes narrowed, a breath of great terror came from his face. A sturdy bone dragon claw suddenly grasped the emperor's palmar slap, and then smashed it directly. Disillusionment started. The day-like eyes burst out with magnificent light. The emperor Linha looked calm, and his clear eyes gradually became cloudy. Incarnate red Jinzalong, 1 gold, 1 bone, and 2 dragons, turned into the last line of defense and stayed here. The ancestors of the first generation of the dragon family and the dragon emperor both fell off the outer battlefield. The emperor dies, the virtual is wounded, and the virtual universe army is erased by nearly 800,000. The boundless corpse is filled with nothingness and void, with countless blood, magic fragments gathered into a winding river. This battle of catastrophe is far from stopped. No one knows when it will end, but it will end with the complete destruction of one universe.